counter-terrorism operations in Yemen at the invitation of the government of Yemen and its international allies. They've promised to investigate any new allegations. When I first met the former mercenary Isaac, he feared he might be prosecuted, but the US laws covering mercenaries are unclear. 3 years on, nothing has happened to him.
You know, did you feel like the operation you took part of was legal?
Yes.
Is that because there was some sort of nod from Washington?
No, it's because we were in line with the US's mission in the region and we were participating with an ally of the US.
Did you know that after you left, the Emirati forces that you trained then trained Yemenis to conduct assassinations?
You train people, you give people a tool, and how they choose to use it is really not your responsibility. So my personal feelings is unfortunate, and war is always messy, but anytime there's conflict, there's going to be people that are hurt or killed that you wish weren't.
So the UAE is working with, arming and funding key members of Al-Qaeda that are US... Yes, now.
When?
Some of the people who actually conducted some of these assassinations were former AQ members.
It's not really surprising. The realities of the world is people change sides, become useful tools. Sometimes somebody's power and gravitas is worth ignoring the sins of their past, because that's what you need to do for a larger objective.
One thing we discussed last time is the kill list. One of the names that was on the list that I've seen is Huda Sarari, who's a female, a human rights lawyer.
Not on my list. So the list you have is something different. I would absolutely remember if that name was on the list.
Many of the names, if not most of the names, are people who have no terrorist connections whatsoever.
And again, the list that you received is something very different from the target list that I was looking at.
So based on what intel? What was the intel that you were provided with about Ansaf Mayo that made you think he was connected to terrorist organizations?
I cannot go into the details of the intel.
But he isn't a terrorist, is he, Isaac? I mean, I've met him since. He is living in Saudi Arabia. Yeah. He's taken part in the UN peace process,
which is fantastic,
for Yemen.
The very nature of intelligence gathering is that it's never 100% absolute.
But for some like Ansaf, who survived the attempt to kill him, those responsible for the assassinations need to be held to account.
I hold them responsible because they were the ones who oversaw the training of these cells and made them skillful in assassinations. There is a big responsibility on their shoulders. Most of those targeted are social, civil, and political activists. I challenge them to find a single terrorist among those who were assassinated. People in Aden want to know the truth. Justice must be served.
To date, Spear have not been prosecuted for their role in the UAE's assassination program, and the families of victims of the assassinations in southern Yemen have yet to receive justice.
I still hope that the judicial system will get back to work and reopen my son's case, and that the person who shot him will be caught and brought to justice.
From exile, Huda is still investigating the assassinations in Yemen, which continue to this day.
I have to stay strong for the sake of my children and to carry on my work. I have to pick myself up and start again.
This episode of Assignment was presented by me, Noel Al-Makhafi. The producer was Alex Last.
That was Assignment from the BBC. I'm Jeff Goods, and this is CBC Radio 1.
Today on Commotion.
The Smiths are a band that celebrates outsiders and rebels and wallflowers, people who often feel like they're on the margins of things. Now the band's been embraced by Donald Trump and the MAGA movement. You'll hear what happened when a Smiths song played at one of Trump's rallies.
So please, please, please let me...
Commotion with Elamin Abdel Mahmoud. This morning at 11:30 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa, and this is Information Radio. We are live in downtown Winnipeg, as always, at 3 minutes to 6 a.m., watching the city wake up. Thanks for joining us this morning and making us part of your day. You're on 89.3 FM, 990 AM, or maybe on the app or on YouTube. Wow, it was mild. And we're going to talk more about whether or not we broke records yesterday in Winnipeg for temperature, but it sure was warm. Today in the city, we won't be quite as warm, but we're still going to crack zero. Our high today is 1 degree, and we'll have increasing cloud with us for this morning. Let's say hello to the team. Corey Funk is here. Good morning, Corey. Corey directs the show, and we'll be covering the commute. Good morning, Abby Adeyemi. Abby is our technical producer on the show, and we'll be covering weather on the program. Travis Peterson is up early behind our YouTube controls, and Heather Wells in our news department with headlines.
Good morning. Well, Winnipeg's birthing center is struggling to hit its target number of 500 births a year. It has yet to even hit 50% capacity, topping out at just 237 babies born in its best year. We are going to hear from the executive director about what needs to happen so that the birthing center does reach its targets. That's coming up. As well, a shortage of snow and cold weather this winter has resulted in a shortage of gasoline in some northern communities. In Shamattawa First Nation, it is being called a critical situation. We'll hear more in our next local news coming up at 6:30.
Heather, you ready for my line?
Okay,
you're going to hear it a lot this morning. Hey ho, oh no.
There you go.
Or maybe hey ho, oh no, no snow. Festival de Voyageur. I know that we're going to talk to them this morning as well about what this means to them.
Yeah, I've been wondering that myself, like for days. What do you do? It's a winter festival.
Yeah,
Where's winter?
You can't make a snow sculpture if there's no snow. So we're going to find out more about it actually later in the morning. In addition, this morning on the program, Heather, of course, will be back with us throughout the show. We are going to be talking about a unique exhibit at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. It explores music as a form of resistance and change, so stay tuned to hear that. On our mental health column today, there's a new advisory from the New York Commissioner of Health and Mental Hygiene. It warns about the impact of social media on the mental health of young people. New York will be the first large American city to look at this and frame youth mental health in this health way for them down south. So we'll hear more about the impact of that here. Stay tuned.
On Q with Tom Power.
The British show Top Boy has had an interesting life. The show about London drug dealers ran for 2 highly acclaimed seasons, and then it got cancelled. The creator of the show, Ronan Bennett, will be here to tell you the story of how Drake saved his show and got it back on TV.
My kids knew who Drake was, but I have to confess, it's not my scene.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. People who lived through the mass stabbing want action to prevent violent crimes. A jury in Saskatchewan agrees. It has released 29 recommendations following a 2.5-week inquiry. They include specific actions for police and the Correctional Service of Canada. The CBC's Sam Sampson brings us a closer look at the recommendations and some reaction.
My sister here, she was a beautiful woman.
Daryl Burns clutches a photo of his sister, Lydia Gloria Burns. She spent her last moments trying to save someone with stab wounds before she was killed. Burns hopes her death and this inquest will keep others from suffering a loss like his.
So if my sister's death means that something positive is going to come out of this, then her legacy is going to live on.
On Wednesday, a provincial inquest jury delivered 29 recommendations to prevent future tragedies. Most were for the RCMP and Correctional Service Canada. There's a push for RCMP to open communications with First Nations leaders, whether it's about wanted persons or how to address drugs and gangs. The jury wants more cultural resources, like elders, in prisons, and continuous support for Indigenous offenders once they get out. Many of these recommendations stem from testimony about the attacker's abusive childhood, his abuse against his common-law spouse, and his time in prison.
I think this inquest took us through a roller coaster.
Family members like Chelsea Stonestand, whose aunt and cousin died, say intergenerational trauma played a part in these attacks, and that's something all Canadians can address.
Talk to your friends, your relatives, and make them aware of these issues that impact all of us. So it doesn't just happen to an Indigenous community. It could happen to any community.
The families hope each organization takes these recommendations seriously, because the hope they feel now won't last long without change. Sam Sampson, CBC News, Melfort, Saskatchewan.
The European Union's 27 countries have reached a deal on the €50 billion aid package to Ukraine. European Council President Charles Michel says that support will lock in long-term predictable funding for Ukraine and sends a clear message to Russia. Hungary had been resisting the deal. The Prime Minister has close ties to Russia, and he threatened to veto the package this morning. But ultimately, Viktor Orban caved to pressure from his EU counterparts. Outside EU headquarters in Brussels, upset farmers from across the continent are protesting as their leaders meet. Dozens of tractors are blocking the streets. Thick black smoke is rising from bonfires. The farmers are trying to get their complaints onto the agenda of the EU Leaders Summit, among them cheaper agricultural imports from Ukraine. We are expecting to hear from the head of CSIS, David Vigneault, today here at home, as well as other senior Canadian intelligence figures. They are due to testify at the Foreign Interference Inquiry in Ottawa. China, Russia, India, and other countries are all accused of meddling in Canada's elections. And Janice McGregor is in our Parliamentary Bureau with more on what to expect. Janice, spies are usually pretty tight-lipped. Any chance we'll get new information today?
Not sure, Marcia. There are a lot of questions, of course. The parties at this inquiry want to ask the security officials, like the head of CSIS, about what signs of foreign interference they were or were not seeing during the 2019 and 2021 elections. But the evidence on that isn't going to be discussed until later this spring. The task today is to grapple with a more fundamental question: how much government decision makers and the public have a right to know about classified intelligence. A former director of CSIS, Dick Fadden, told the inquiry yesterday that Canada's allies are much more open about their briefings.
While much of the information that you will be interested in deserves protection, the culture, the workload, and the tradition in agencies, I think, is to tend towards overprotection. Things tend to be classified more than they need to be.
The key question for this commission this week is whether things can be, even should be, different now. And if spy agencies do share more, how to do that without compromising secret sources or their relationships with international allies.
One of the groups involved in sounding the alarm about foreign interference has already lost faith in this process. Tell us about that.
In a statement late yesterday, the Uyghur Rights Advocacy Project said it was pulling out over the decision of Commissioner Marie-Josée Hug to allow a couple of politicians accused of having close ties to the Chinese Communist Party in Beijing to have full standing at this inquiry. That allows them to see more materials than will be released to the public, and it would allow them to cross-examine the testimony of witnesses from diaspora communities. UGG had tried to provide reassurances on Monday about protecting these groups, but she also said that those whose reputations have been attacked do have the right to explain themselves.
Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor reporting from Ottawa. A man accused of helping people around the world die by suicide is due back in court in Ontario today. Kenneth Law faces 14 counts of first-degree murder and 14 counts of counseling or aiding suicide in the province. Now, one woman's experience is raising questions about a mysterious person online who may be connected to the case. Thomas Daigle has more, and a warning: this story contains talk of self-harm.
It was just a click and that was it. It got past customs.
More than a year ago, Emma Morrison from Dundee, Scotland, says she attempted suicide using a toxic substance ordered from Kenneth Law's website. She very nearly died and is now speaking out about the shadowy figure identified online as Greenberg, who she says coached her to kill herself.
He basically guided me through how I should take it, how much I should take, to make sure it works.
CBC News has seen multiple posts online showing Greenberg directing vulnerable people to the Ontario man's websites. Police allege Law sold products intended for self-harm, and they're suspected of being linked to 124 deaths worldwide. Morrison says she believes Law was in touch with his buyers using that alias.
The connection between Kenneth Law and Greenberg is, I think they're the same person.
CBC has not been able to verify that claim. We asked an investigator last month if Law was in direct contact with his alleged victims, but York Regional Police Inspector Simon James declined to say.
I don't think it's appropriate for me to comment, just to keep the investigation safeguarded.
Law is set to appear in court by video link from jail today. His lawyer says at trial, Law will be pleading not guilty. Thomas Daigle, CBC News, Toronto.
A Liberal MP says Atlantic Canadians are being overcharged for gasoline and diesel. A new report shows companies are collecting a lot more than they need to cover the cost of complying with new environmental rules. And the MP says energy regulators should cut the price of fuel. Peter Cowan has more.
In Atlantic Canada, every litre that drivers put into their tank pumps an extra 5 cents into oil company coffers. The additional charge is supposed to cover the costs of cutting emissions. It's a mandate from the federal government. These rules are in place across Canada, but because gas prices are regulated in the Atlantic provinces, companies here have to apply to recoup their costs. A report commissioned by Environment and Climate Change Canada found the actual cost of complying is less than 1 cent a litre, not the 5 companies are collecting.
These prices are actually being inflated.
Jenica Atwin is a Liberal MP from New Brunswick.
Atlantic Canadians are being overcharged, and it's unacceptable again at a time when, costs of living is so high.
The energy companies say they're investing billions to produce cleaner gas and diesel. The Canadian Fuels Association says the current fees are fair. Carole Montreuil is a regional vice president with the association. He warns if prices are cut, companies could decide to pull out of Atlantic Canada.
If these utility boards, where prices are controlled, don't find the right number to fairly compensate how expensive this regulation is, there's a real risk that we'll end up with a security of supply issue.
This week, the energy regulator in New Brunswick is weighing the evidence, and other provinces will be watching to see what it finds is fair. Peter Cowan, CBC News, St. John's.
Later this morning in Toronto's Rawlinson Community School, it will sound a little like this.
Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies.
The elementary and middle school is going to raise the Pan-African flag to mark the start of Black History Month. If you have not seen it, the flag is 3 horizontal stripes, red at the top to represent the blood that unites all people of Black African ancestry, then black for the people, and green to represent the abundant natural wealth of Africa. As you can hear, the students are excited about this moment. Here they are practicing the Black National Anthem, Lift Every Voice.
Let us march on till victory is won.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcuso. Welcome to February. This is 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube. You're on CBC. Thanks for making us part of your morning. Warm, mild again today in Winnipeg. Well, speaking of Black History Month, a lot of the criticism is that we don't need a month anymore. We should be talking about these things year-round. We're going to dig into that this morning in this hour of the show. We're also going to remind ourselves of the contributions of Black people in Canada as we hear from the leader of a Black history organization about how to move beyond what people already know and expect and make the most of this time to talk. So stay tuned for that. In addition, this hour on the show, how'd you do yesterday enjoying the warm weather? Yep, there were shorts. There were short sleeves. There was a distinct lack of toques in the air. We'll talk more about what records we are hoping we broke as we await the official news from Environment Canada. Right now it's 6:11. Let's go to Heather Wells, who's in our news department. Good morning. And I think we're just waiting.
There.
Hi, were you on the line with Environment Canada?
I was.
Excellent.
Sorry. And he's giving me numbers and I'm going, I got to run. Here's another number. It was great. I was just speaking with Chris Stammers at Environment Canada, who tells us the last day of January broke 24 records across Manitoba. The warmest in McCreary, which for the second day in a row was the Manitoba hotspot. McCreary got up to 12.1 degrees. In Winnipeg, we did not break a record because our official temperature comes from the airport, which got to 4.7 yesterday. We were warm throughout the rest of the city at 7.3 at the Forks, but the old record was 5.0 in 1952. And because the airport report is the official temperature. We did not officially break a record, but we felt the warmth.
Yeah.
So we'll bring you more about that coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Thank you for running in, too.
No problem.
Appreciate it. Heather's next cast, of course, at 6:30, and we're going to hear more about how people enjoyed yesterday in a moment. Jim Agapito was out and about. All right, let's get into the forecast for today. It won't be quite as warm, Abby. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Marcy. As you start your day this morning, be prepared for mainly cloudy skies. Notice some fog patches on my way in this morning. From the south this way, it was a bit just here and there. But then as I approached the downtown area, it felt like a scene from an Irish pirate movie.
It did, I know.
And then I was like waiting to see a ghost ship just sail because the lights were just like so far in the fog, and it felt different this morning driving in.
So I kind of drive through the Polo Park area here in this part of the city, and so extending even to that part of the city as well. It's a pretty thick blanket of fog.
Yeah. Now, however, the fog patches should be dissipating later, and then it's going to be creating clearer visibility for people that will be commuting. Currently, the temperature sits at -2 degrees. Throughout the day, we can expect clouds to come and go. It's going to be more like a hide and seek. The cloud would come in, give some shade, and then go off. The wind, however, is going to stay relatively calm. It's just going to be breezy as you step out the door this morning. The high is expected to be mild at just 1 degree. But right now, Winnipeg is at -2.
Driving was a pleasure yesterday.
It was.
To be honest. I mean,
except the slushy parts.
Yeah, it wasn't that bad on my drive, though. I had to remind myself that it wasn't the middle of not even March. It felt like April. It was so warm out there.
Yeah,
Wow.
I was also looking at my roof. I usually worry about
Hi,
ice
Corey
damming.
Funk, by
Oh,
the
hi,
way.
everybody. I was also looking at my roof. Usually this time of year, I'm like freaking out about ice damming
Oh,
and
the
things
roof on
like
your
that.
house.
It was just
Not
clear.
the roof on your car.
Oh, yeah. So sorry. Yes, I was just thinking all these like weird little side benefits
Yeah.
of this weather, and it's usually me freaking out like, oh no.
Ice damming is not one of those benefits.
Yeah, exactly. So that was nice to just see a bare roof. This is like a weird homeowner thing where you're like, ooh.
Yeah. Anything this morning? Issues out
No,
there?
really, not too bad out there right now. I can tell you if you are on the sidewalks, might run in today, there's two modes, either slippery or slushy. And I imagine it's going to start getting slushier as the day goes on and the temperature warms up. So do look out for that if you're hitting the sidewalks. But if you see anything else going on out there on the roads, highways, keep an eye out for that fog. Don't put on those high beams because it only makes things worse. Give me a call on the CBC commuter line, 204-788-3093.
Well, the time right now is 6:15, and if you're just getting up and thinking about what you're going to wear today, as Abby said, 1 degree is our daytime high. Yesterday, people were peeling off the layers, as Heather just confirmed. We did not officially break the record from 1952, which was 5 degrees. In Winnipeg, at the airport, that's where they measure our temperature, 4.7. But at the Forks, we did get up to 7.3. It was unheard of. It was the forecast daytime high at 6 degrees was 17 degrees above normal for the last day of January in Winnipeg. And so we couldn't resist. CBC's Jim Agapito headed out to talk to folks.
Melissa Anderson.
Brittany Penner.
Larissa Thiessen.
I see you're doing a great activity with your children. So tell me, how are you enjoying this unusually warm weather?
Yeah, no, it's great. We were out and about and they're hardly bundled up, so.
Yeah, it's really nice. And we don't have to stay in the house all day. We can get out and pass some of the time outside, which is really nice.
No, we got a coffee, enjoying the Forks, and wishing we could skate.
Yeah.
But, shopping for kids' stuff instead.
Yeah. And the fact that it's January 31st, unusually warm, I'm wondering, what is this doing for, I guess, your mood and what you would not normally be doing?
Totally. As a mom, I feel like our mental health is just so much higher because, they said before, we can actually get outside and get out and about and enjoy the weather as opposed to being cooped up and worried about naps and things. So, no, it's awesome.
Yeah, definitely helpful to get out and not be stuck inside all day and be able to get some sunshine.
Yeah, we're really enjoying the nice warm weather, and so are these guys.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, no, it can be really depressing when you're stuck in your house and it's too cold to go outside. So this is just a really nice break.
Yeah.
I don't know how long it'll last, but fingers crossed for a while.
Yeah, totally. Taking it while we can and enjoying it while it's here.
Same.
Okay, what have you changed with your routine then? It went from Oh no, but you're not bundled up, I hope.
No.
Not too bad.
He's loving the weather, I swear.
Well, as long as moms are. So if the temperature does change, how will that affect you?
I think we'll be bummed. We're expecting it, so we're holding this kind of hands open and soaking in what we can, but it's what it is. It's Manitoba, for Pete's sake.
Well, yeah, exactly. Expecting it to get cold again, but I mean, if it stays like this, amazing.
It's like a little vacation without going anywhere.
Yeah.
So,
My name is Curtis Hilaire.
It's January 31st. How are you enjoying this unusually warm day?
Oh, it's unreal. Like right now, I took my sweater off. It's too warm for me, and it's just great to be outside and just enjoy the good weather.
This is unusual, so I'm wondering, how has your plans changed for the day?
Oh, it's definitely changed. Since this good weather, this whole week, it just made us want to be more outside and actually get out of the house and cherish it while it lasts.
What are you doing that you wouldn't normally do in January right now?
I've just been outside, more walking, things like that. Normally I'm all bundled up in the house because it's freezing, but actually just physically getting outside, walking around, taking the dog for walks, stuff like that, more so than I was before, just because I want to spend every minute outside, I guess. It's uplifting for sure. I feel people in winter, it kind of brings their mood down, but just being able to enjoy it, definitely a good plus.
Alicia Torres.
My name is Eileen Fernandez.
Okay, so you're here from Mexico. This is the most unusual day for January.
It's very cold, really.
Oh yeah, I was telling her, I was like, this is usually warm. For now, it's pretty warm. And she was like, how is this warm? She was like, this is way too cold. But yeah, compared to the past weather we've been having, this is like summer, basically. It's really not
really.
Not really.
Were you here to experience the really cold weather last week?
Yeah, a little.
Compared to it now.
This is strange for me, In Mexico, it's very, very hot, so...
How do you feel about the weather right now?
I like it a lot. Compared to the minus 30 we were having at the beginning of the month, it's insane. But we wanted to skate, and the river's closed, and then the skating rink is closed. So that's the bad part, but, I'm enjoying the weather. Yeah, definitely.
How will you spend the rest of the day? If you're not going to skate, what will the two of you do?
I don't know.
We might go walk around the exchange, maybe. It's a nice day to walk around.
So I am looking now to see how long we have forecasted daytime highs that are above zero or above. And right now it's looking that we're right through Monday if this holds in Winnipeg. It was incredible yesterday, certainly. CBC's Jim Agapito out asking Winnipeggers what they thought of the warm January weather and the record-breaking day across parts of the province. Didn't quite crack it in Winnipeg, but McCreary yesterday getting up to 12.1, as Heather mentioned. That's amazing. Right now in the city of Winnipeg, it is misty and it's -2.
Nothing can stop an Ironman from stepping onto the frozen river to curl. Except the weather. This warm spell means the Ironman Outdoor Curling Bonspiel is being rescheduled to February 16th to 18th. Join us then for the family fun spiel we've all been waiting for. The Ironman Outdoor Curling Bonspiel, now February 16th to 18th, proudly sponsored by CBC.
Time right now is 6:20 on 89.3 FM, 990 AM or on the app. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks for making us part of your morning. It is a time of year where things start to sort of get a little bit maybe more rhythmic and routine, which isn't a bad thing. We made it through January. Here we are in February. School day number 1 if you're up getting the kids ready this morning. Well, next on the program, let's talk about Black History Month. February. The Parliament of Canada first recognized the occasion in 2008, the goal to honor the contributions of Black communities to the country and to celebrate diverse histories. But figuring out how to do that can be tricky, especially if the intention is to move beyond what people already know and expect. We're joined now by Michael Farkas to talk about it, president of the Black History Month Roundtable, a nonprofit organization based out of Quebec that's focused on the experiences of Black communities year-round. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you for being with us. What are some of the concerns that you raise about how Black History Month is marked in Canada?
It could be that Black history doesn't start per se with 400 years of our coming through slavery. Maybe we need to look at the whole of our contributions throughout the world. So often we need to look maybe at Africa and the different countries where we came from initially. So that would be interesting too. And I don't think that's there's not enough people. Obviously, we need to join with Africans to understand also how that went and how that goes. But I do agree that we need to go beyond. But there's still the impact of Rosa Parks. I mean, we know the story of Rosa Parks, but she still has an impact. Has it changed anything? So we still can gauge even some of those moments here in America, Martin Luther King and so on. But yeah, I think we need to look at since back in the days of what Black people have done on this earth, the different empires and everything. The conquest, the mercenaries in Europe and so on. So there's many aspects of Black culture and history that still needs to be told to the generations.
How are we doing with sharing those stories year round, in your view, versus still having, this month, which in some ways can be, while it's a positive thing to have it identified, officially marked, that we would talk about this in February. Obviously, the intention is that this would be something that we just carry year round and talk about carry with us and understand our stories of our history. How are we doing on that front? Is that getting better in your view or not?
Well, here in Quebec, it's still not in the school curriculum, so there's still place for that. So we're not doing so good. So Black History Month is a window of opportunity to at least say, with dignity, show who we are and everything. So there's still much work to be done, even in our Black communities, but around just Canadians plainly. They don't know of our history. Sometimes that we are part of history, because it's not a separate thing. When there's any major event that happens in the life of Canadians or in the life of the people here, it impacts everyone. So in that respect, but we might be at the lower end often of the situations that occur, because we've been sidelined for so long, so we're trying to restore that, and we are. I think we're moving on positively.
What are some of the tropes or cliches or pitfalls that you hope will be avoided?
Well, I mean, we don't all. Black people are very diverse. They represent diversity, so we do have different opinions or different ways of handling things, or different philosophies and so on. So we have to respect that, just like everybody else in the world right now that's trying to find a place under the sun. So in that way, controversies or different issues will happen, and as long as it's respectfully discussed or at least agreed that we don't agree. But facts is facts. History is history, and that we can check. When we go in the records, when the archives and so on, that's what we need to study. Education is the key. That's the main thing, and that's what we need to recognize, that because even Black people have to know that the motherland is Africa per se. Does everyone recognize that as Black folks, that we all came once upon a time from Africa, and so on? So education is the key.
You mentioned Montreal doesn't yet have, Black history as part of the curriculum, mandatory curriculum in schools. Is there a province that's leading the way on that front when you look across Canada that is something to be proud of or maybe to follow?
I spoke this morning to Halifax, and it looks like it is in the school curriculum in Halifax, Nova Scotia. So I'll probably recommend them at this point. Yep.
What do you hope people think about during this month to propel those conversations forward, or for those of us that aren't Black to be an ally, so to speak, to deepening our understanding of our community?
Yeah, once you understand that Blacks have contributed throughout the wars, have contributed throughout the tragedies of us as a people through times, and that we've always been sidelined, not documented. Well, you say maybe we need to do better, and And today we're understanding that people are diverse in many ways, and that their features, the color of their skin, and so on, has to be sidelined so that we can all achieve our goals. So I think there is that momentum. Is there still a ways to go? Definitely, to change the negativity around the different perceptions and to fight back racism. So in that respect, we're just asking for our own dues as Canadians, and we want to help everyone, in Canada, just like everybody helps us too, in general. Yeah.
Just as a last question for you, after this month is over, what are your goals moving forward? I understand you have some workshops and conferences you hope to build upon.
Yeah, correct. I mean, as often there is the line of thinking that Black History is a short month and so on, and February is a cold month and so on, but it shows our resilience too. We also know there's Frederick Douglass or Bob Marley actually are born in the month. Abraham Lincoln, the father of emancipation and so on. So in that respect, we don't stop at February. We keep on going. There's still all kinds of things to do, whether it's Women's Day coming up in March, whether it's the fight against racism week, as we know, the 21st of March and so on. So it doesn't stop there. But I mean, we want to be just involved, just like, our kids mainly like basketball and so on. So they be looking at all kinds of things. They don't just look at that. So that's where we want to go. We want to look at the stars, and that's what we want to achieve, just like everybody else in Canada, basically.
Thank you very much, Michael, for being up early and with us this morning.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it. Michael Farkas is president of the Black History Month Roundtable. It's a nonprofit organization. It's based in Quebec. It's focused on the experiences of Black communities year-round. And he joined us this morning from Montreal.
She's challenged the status quo at every turn, regaining ownership of her master recordings, convincing Apple and Spotify to pay artists in a more equitable way. And she holds over 70 Guinness World Records. The marketing of Taylor Swift on Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly. Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland. And on the CBC Listen app. There are stories you just can't stop thinking about. They take you somewhere, they introduce you to someone, they share something new with you. Lift off. Those are the stories you want to share with your friends, and CBC's award-winning documentary team is bringing them to you every week on Storylines. Storylines, new this season on CBC Radio 1, and always on demand on the CBC Listen app.
Well, our last conversation prompted us to start looking up how Black history is taught in our schools here. And the province, on their website, outlined some of the things that they're working on. Manitoba Education and Early Childhood Learning looks at the need for inclusive curriculum to challenge discrimination and racism and advance equity. So they are looking at a webpage. They've created a webpage. Elements integrated into the curriculum. It was designed to ensure that diversity is addressed in the curriculum. Now, has that been the experience in the classrooms? You tell us. 788-3205. Right now, your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it is -2 after a record-breaking day yesterday. February begins still very much warmer than normal for this time of year. Increasing clouds in Winnipeg and a high today of 1. People in Boissevain are shocked to learn the biggest narcotics bust on the prairies happened near their town. Border officers seized more than 400 kilos of what's believed to be meth from a semi on January 14th. Those drugs were inside large suitcases in a semi trying to enter Canada through the border south of Boissevain. Haven Couvelier lives in the town of 1500.
It's crazy to me. I would never expect anything like that to happen this close to Boissevain.
The semi driver, a 29-year-old man from Winnipeg, was arrested and turned over to RCMP. He will be in court today. Investigators say they don't yet know where that semi was coming from, only that it was heading from the U.S. to Winnipeg. Officials also have yet to determine where the drugs originated. Winnipeg's birthing center is falling short on its birth targets because of a continued lack of midwives. The center, now known as Odamin, opened in 2011 with an expected capacity of 500 births a year. It's not even hitting 50% of that number. A Winnipeg Regional Health Authority midwife is required for a woman to give birth at the center, but according to the health region, they can only fill roughly 75% of the requests that come in. The center's executive director, Kemlyn Nemhard, says they need more midwives and more funding, but she says other services have expanded.
There's a lot more that happens here than when we first opened 12 years ago, but we haven't had an increase in the funding to support the staffing and all the other resources we need to support that work.
Odamin is home to the Breast Milk Bank, an infant hearing screening program, and offers help for mothers who have lost their babies. Total clinic visits to the center have more than doubled since it opened. Well, Alberta officials will be revealing more today about that province's new trans and classroom pronoun policy. Premier Danielle Smith announced the changes in a video posted on social media.
For children age 15 and under, puberty blockers and hormone therapies for the purpose of gender reassignment or affirmation will also not be permitted, with the exception of those who've already commenced their treatment at this time. Minors aged 16 and 17 will be permitted to commence hormone therapies for gender reassignment and affirmation purposes, so long as they are deemed mature enough to make these decisions and have parental, physician, and psychologist approval.
LGBTQ advocacy groups EGAL Canada and Skipping Stone Foundation warn they will bring legal action if Alberta moves ahead with those changes. The European Union's 27 countries have just reached a new deal to deliver aid to Ukraine. The package is worth 50 billion euros. European Council President Charles Michel says that support will lock in long-term predictable funding for Ukraine and sends a clear message to Russia. You can hear the latest national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. Well, warm weather records were melting right across Manitoba yesterday. 24 records were broken. The warmest was McCreary at 12.1 degrees, breaking a record set back in 1993 of 9.4. Then came Morden and Winkler at 11.3 each, Altona at 10.4, Carman at 10.1. And while the sunshine warmed Winnipeg up yesterday to 7.3 at the Forks, the airport is where the official temperature is marked, and it only reached 4.7, so not breaking the record of 5 set in 1952. More warm days are expected right through this next week. Well, the warm winter is causing trouble for some northern Manitoba communities. One of those is Shamattawa First Nation. It has run out of gasoline because the winter road hasn't opened. Walter Wastesakut is Grand Chief of the Keewatin Tribal Council. He says some problems in the north could be solved with all-season roads in the face of climate change.
There's a lot of services in the communities that are impacted. As I say, one of them is health. That's a big one. Then education. Another issue could be the hunting that our people do, harvesting from the land. Can't go anywhere, no fuel.
Wastesakut also says gas was expected to be flown into the community yesterday, but there's been a struggle to get a plane that can transport fuel. Well, dusting off the golf clubs at the end of January. That last day of January was the first day of golf season for some Winnipeggers. Business was brisk at the driving range at Shooters Golf Centre. Manager Isan Sarazani says they were originally planning to hold off opening until the weekend, until they took a closer look at the calendar.
We realized if we opened January 31st and on the weekend, and we opened last year in early March, and we were open in December, we've been open for 12 months. Pretty hard to do in Winnipeg.
And Sarasani does hope he can keep his driving range open right through the weekend. You can find more news updated throughout the day, as well as the weather. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Did you do anything special in the weather yesterday, Heather? I didn't really. And then
I actually was at the Forks, and there were so many people there. And walking around outside at the Forks, you could feel the sun on your skin. It was really beautiful.
Yeah, it was just something. I did enjoy driving, though. I hate to say it, but it was kind of nice. I wasn't on side streets. I was on main thoroughfare. fires. And
Did you have your window down?
I didn't have my window down. I should have thought of that. Well, I missed all the good stuff. Today's going to be nice, but not quite as nice as it was. Abby's here now with our regional forecast.
Good morning. Yes, not as nice as yesterday, but it is another mild day. First day in February, still very mild. It is currently -2 degrees in Winnipeg. A little bit of breeze and then fog reported in some parts of the city. Brandon is currently seeing freezing fog at -2. It will be a bit of mix of sun and cloud today, and then these fog patches that we're seeing in the southern parts will be dissipating later. You're heading to a high of 2 degrees. Thompson is currently at -16 with light snow. It will be mainly cloudy up there with that light chance of snow later today, and then the cloudy sky would clear as you move into the afternoon period. Churchill is partly cloudy at the moment. You are currently at -17. It's cloudy up there. 30% chance of light snow, and you'll be seeing a high of -4 degrees. Gimli is currently at -2, heading to a high of 2 degrees. Dauphin is currently at -4 degrees, heading to a high of 1 degree. Steinberg is currently at -4, heading to a high of 2. And Maurice is currently at -2, heading to a high of 2 degrees. It's always like the plus and then the minuses. That's what's happening today. But Winnipeg is currently at 2 degrees.
All right, stick around, Abby, because I'm going to ask you to answer our Facebook question in a second.
Please, I'm expecting that.
Right now, though, let's turn to Corey for a moment for the commute.
Yeah, just heard from Dan on a bike on the commuter line. He said rapid transit is looking great, but careful if there's any sort of slight downhill, because there is still some of slick spots out there. If you're walking or biking, might just throw you off and you might not notice it right away. So careful, look out for that. Otherwise, the fog might get in your way in some spots across the city and other places in the province. But if you see something else going on out there on the roads, on the sidewalks, on the highways, bike lanes, give me a call. Curious about any new potholes. There's got to be a few that have showed up, especially after today. Come on, give me a call, 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks, Cor.
Thank you.
So we just had a conversation about Black History Month and where the gaps are in learning in this country, and how those who work on this year-round are hoping to spread the history and enhance curriculum in schools across Canada as well around Black history. So we popped up on Facebook this question, trying to localize this and bring it back to where we live. What do you appreciate most about the Black community in Manitoba? And Abby and I have been chatting about this off air, so we figured we'd talk about it on air.
Yes, I've been thinking about that because, one thing, let's say some 10, 15 years ago, a lot of people moving from their own country to this part of the world always have one cultural shock, which has to do with the food. So I'm coming from the angle of the food with history, because a lot of people would only daydream of traveling back home to go have a feel of the food. But fast forward to today now, we have stores, we have restaurants that serve those meals. And one thing that caught my attention, I walk into like a typical either Nigerian store, an Ethiopian store, a Jamaican store, or even the restaurant. I find non-Black people in there, and they're like, they know what they're ordering, and it just blows my mind, because back then I'm not sure you'd have that much traffic moving in there. So it tells about the community that you'd first think, oh, the nearest Black store is going to be like miles and miles away, or the nearest Black restaurant is going to be, but they're like in almost every community now, you'd find one there. And it means if they're not doing well, if the community is not appreciating them, they won't be there. They must have folded up. But these stores and restaurants
are being supported.
By
everybody.
And I feel guilty now because we're talking about this. We're talking about this, and I'm calling myself out before you call myself out.
Oh, I know where you're going. Abby feels guilty because he's an awesome cook and he has a signature dish, and I still haven't had it.
Okay, I'm going to also call myself out because I actually made for Wendy also, and she appreciated it before you. So yeah, I'm already calling myself out.
You've made jollof rice for others, and I haven't had it yet.
No, you're my sister. You need to wait. It's the wait that matters.
Okay, that was a good save. I don't know if I buy it.
You just have to wait to appreciate it. And I've actually been selling the recipe out. I think Phil listening now also knows that he's been practicing to cook some Nigerian meals. And so it's just one thing I love about thinking about Black History Month. I think about the culture of the food. how it's come from that part of the world and it's spreading all across the continent.
Well, you know what? I have to say, though, Abby, like, just so the listeners don't feel too bad here and think that it's one-sided, I haven't yet made you pierogies.
I know the reason why, but I'll take that.
I owe you that.
Yep.
I'm going to answer the question as well, and then we'll hopefully get some folks answering as well. So Abby was answering the question about what he appreciates most about the Black community in Manitoba. And my answer to this question actually has to do with the people that I've met along the way in our community. What I appreciate most is attitude. Joyful, giving, resilient, give back attitude. And honestly, just thinking about Jackson, Ohio, who, just remembering the roots and giving back. Our early morning interview was talking about the connection between Black Canadians who are here now and then obviously not forgetting Africa. And there's so many Manitobans that live in both worlds and do not forget and give back. So Jackson, Ohio came as a child soldier, came here. He's now back in Burundi. He's running a clinic there. He's a nurse. He comes back home here to Manitoba. He calls both places home. Also, the Humankind International dinner that happens each and every year with 3 refugees, and they came here. They were refugees back in the day. But of course, now they're giving back to the refugee camp, Dadaab Refugee Camp, and they're building a school there. So these are all Manitobans that aren't forgetting their roots. And I think that's something that I appreciate the most. And I really appreciate that. And I see it a lot in just the Manitobans that I know personally here that are part of our Black community. So why don't you answer the question? What do you appreciate most about the Black community in Manitoba? 788-3205 or on Facebook. It is time. Abby was talking about Phil Demont, I believe, and it's time to connect with Phil Demont. Hi, Phil.
Hi, Marcy.
So let's start with business news here. The U.S. Fed has held interest rates steady this week, and Canada's economy grew in November. What does that mean about the two economies when you look at them in contrast?
Well, I think right now they're stronger than people initially thought. You take the U.S., the Federal Reserve, less interest rates alone. You're right in its decision on Wednesday. Analysts were hoping for maybe some early interest rate cuts. There had been an indication that the bank was going to cut rates, but they threw cold water on the notion of early numbers. They want to see more data that inflation is headed down towards the 2% level. To me, the interpretation here is that the American economy is growing fast enough that inflation remains a concern, because if it wasn't a concern anymore, then they'd be looking at rates. They'd be saying, the data's enough, that kind of stuff. Instead, you got the Bank of Montreal forecasting American GDP to grow more than 2% this year. And that's a fairly decent number. Other players not as optimistic. Wells Fargo sees the American economy growing at less than 1%. Canada approaching 2024 from a different economic angle. A lot of analysts were saying our economy had basically slowed to a stop in the fourth quarter and maybe into the beginning of this year. But Canada's GDP posted a surprise gain in November, up 0.2%, and we might have even grown even faster in December. So the implication is that the economy grew 1.2%. for the last 3 months of the year. Not a ton, not a stunning number, but considering BMO's, the Bank of Montreal's forecast for the same period, the next, last 3 months and this 3 months, zero. They expected no growth at all. Put two bits of data together, two economies might be showing unexpected growth for the first half of the year. Analysts consistently underestimated the strength of the American economy last year. They might be overly pessimistic about Canada's fortunes as well.
Let's go to another story. Why are high freight rates in Russia a good sign for the global economy?
It means companies are trying to find different ways to move goods. Freight handlers are reporting rising interest by shippers in sending goods from China to Europe by rail through Russia. Not a high volume route historically, but with the Red Sea less of an option these days, companies seeking alternative routes to send and receive goods. Sending stuff through the Suez Canal from China to Europe usually takes about 3 weeks. Rerouting the same goods around the South African coast, that part of Africa, adds another 2 weeks. By rail, takes as little as 2 weeks, and the land route is pretty safe. Recently, more countries and companies trying to find better ways to ship their products. India, exploring whether it can supply Russia by transiting through Iran. China spent billions rehabilitating the African port of Djibouti on the Gulf of Aden to access that continent. Even in the present conflict, goods are being dropped off at ports in Bahrain and the UAE on the Gulf of Dubai and then shipped by train to Israel. during the pandemic and those disruptions we all talked about at the time. After that, countries like China especially being aggressive at finding different ways to make sure those breakdowns don't happen again. Going across Russia as a new trade route, just the latest effort in that case.
To another story here before markets, what other streaming services are now cracking down on password sharing? This relates to an earlier story.
Yeah, Disney basically said they will institute the policy that Netflix brought in last year, forcing people not to be able to share passwords. Starting in March, you'll no longer be able to share your Disney Plus, Hulu, ESPN Plus accounts with friends and family. They said last year, Disney, they'd bring the hammer down in 2024. Could actually help the streamer because Netflix enjoyed large numbers of paid users after it introduced its ban on password sharing last spring. Before the move, Netflix estimated as many as 100 million households worldwide shared an account, but in the most recent quarter, the fourth quarter, the company added 13 million new subscribers in the last 3 months. That was a record number, and it's been attributed to the password crackdown.
What's going on in markets?
Right now, mixed inflation data in Europe has Germany, France down a bit, UK up a bit. Same story in Asia with Hong Kong up, Shanghai and the Nikkei in Japan down. Oil up 72 cents, $76.57 a barrel, and the Canadian dollar down a third of a cent, trading at 74.33 cents U.S.
All right, thank you very much, Phil.
Thanks, Marcy.
That's Phil DeMont filling in for Chrisley Ramlican with Business News.
Keep loving you, feeling you, I fight for you. I couldn't imagine I'd wake up alone in this room. Went to church with you, sat up in the pew. All right, I give it. You take it, forgave your mistakes and still I can't relate. Found broken parts, but that wasn't the case. So how we gon' make it if So how we gon' make it if I cook for you? Had your babies too. Sacrifice for you. I couldn't imagine I'd wake up alone. I give it. You take it. Forgave your mistakes and still I can't relate. Found broken parts, but that wasn't the case. Feeling half empty. Oh, half empty. I went to church with you. I had them babies too. I read the Bible with you, baby. Yeah, I couldn't think no more. Hey, I was loving you. Oh, I can't fight. Baby, I fall for you.
It's never a bad morning to play some Julie Black. It's a good tune if you're getting into your day. Start of a new month. That tune's called Half Empty. It is 9 minutes to 7 o'clock on 89.3 FM, 990 AM or on the app. Next on the program, it seems sometimes like there are coaches for everything these days. Dating, dealing with your finances, or just life in general. The latest thing, though, featured recently in an article in the Wall Street Journal is empty nest coaches. The idea is to support highly involved, hands-on parents who may be at loose ends after their kid moves away. To talk about it, Louise Gleason is with us, a registered psychotherapist and writer. Good morning.
Good morning.
So what are your thoughts on this, coaches, and how they can be used or to help people through this empty nest period?
I actually had two reactions when I read that article myself. First, I was able to remember myself when I was going through that for the first time, and I absolutely felt compassion and empathy. It's such a huge shift in a parent's life. But the other thought I had was a little bit of worry that it's sending the message that this is something that needs to be fixed or avoided. And it absolutely doesn't have to be. We can go through it. We can feel it.
Fixed or avoided in terms of what? That people would think, it's not natural to feel a range of feelings and that
That's
they should
right.
seek to keep their kids at home?
Or that they should avoid, going through the huge transition, that it's something they want to kind of go around. What can I do to not feel this way? And maybe the answer is you just have to feel that way.
What are some of the, can you describe some of what we're talking about when we say feel that way? What are some of the emotions and the range of things that people might go through?
I think there's a few things that happen during this time that are kind of experienced by most parents that fit this description, and that's a big loss of purpose, going from doing everything with and for our kids to not having that in our day-to-day lives anymore. There's also a huge shift in how we spend our time, because our kids' lives often drive a lot of this for us. And then finally, and maybe this is a lesser thought of one, we lose a lot of our built-in social groups when our kids leave because, their busy lives bring us into proximity with all these different social groups, and that kind of goes by the wayside. So I would say that if I was to describe it in one word, that what we go through is grief, not just because we miss our kids, of course, but because there's a huge shift in our identity, and we really do have to say goodbye to those versions of ourselves.
Do you think parents today deal with this any differently from past generations? And are we missing talking about a cultural component where often kids, in different cultures might stay at home even longer? So I'm wondering whether, how broadly this affects all of us people in Canada, and also whether or not there's a generational change.
Okay, I'll answer the first one about the generation change first, and then I'll get to your next one. Like many folks, I had this, thought that my parents barely flinched when I left the home, one generation ago. I have this movie that plays in my head of my parents pulling up at my university and kind of pushing me out of the car and squealing out of the parking lot. But it wasn't until I became a mother myself and kind of was retelling that story with my mom that she finally confessed to me that she actually found it really difficult to get out of bed after I'd left for a little while. So I think the shift that's happened is that parenting distress or things like that parents went through in those earlier generations was very much behind closed doors.
Mm-hmm.
I think today's generation of parents are much more willing to be open and to talk about their feelings, and that's a great, great thing. Culturally, the differences in different cultures across Canada, absolutely, that's such a great point. I'm my third child about to launch now, and certainly she gives me such good insight into this. There's many, many cultures for which empty nesting right at 18 or when school comes along and it's time for college or university, that moving out of the home is not even a possibility. It's just not what that culture does.
It's not a norm. Yep.
It's out of the norm, and that's fine. That's fine.
It changes the conversations, though, right? It's so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
How can parents prepare for the transition for those that are, know that it's coming up?
Well, I've talked about some of the things that can happen regarding what we'll notice changing, and we can anticipate it. We can expect that this is going to happen, and we can begin to think of how we're going to fill that. So what's your new purpose going to be? How are you going to fill your time? And what social groups might you explore that have nothing to do with your kids? The big piece of advice I would give around how to get ready for this is to really understand how to talk about it with your kids. So of course you're going to share your sadness. Of course you're going to tell them that you're missing them or that you're going to miss them. But it's important not to make them feel responsible for you.
Why?
We don't want our children at this exciting time in their life to feel like they need to be worried about whether you're okay.
When do people stop feeling like an empty nester? What would you say to that? How long does that feeling that you're talking about, I think your word was grief, last for people?
You know, I'm going to say something that most people won't expect me to hear, but if you're lucky, it doesn't ever go away. If your heart feels an ache because you don't have your children with you and in your daily life, it's a beautiful thing. It's because there was love there, beautiful memories, lovely feelings. It's something to be grateful for and to treasure. I will say it does get softer. It does dull over time, but we don't have to give up that tender feeling.
I want to ask you as a last question here, because we do have just a touch more time. People talk a lot about so-called boomerang kids who actually do leave, but then they move back home. It comes with a certain stigma, though. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
I think we have to be so careful about making blanket statements or having ideas about this because there's so many layers to each family story, as you and I had touched on earlier. And I think we really have to go back to our parenting instincts. You know your child. You know what they need. There are factors that come into play for each unique family, and that family has its own needs. I think we have to stay focused inwardly on what the family and child needs and not get too distracted about what others are doing.
Louise, thank you very much for weighing in thoughtfully on this today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Louise Gleason is a registered psychotherapist and writer. It's quite a topic. If it's got you thinking out there, whether or not you're sitting in your empty nest because the kids have gone, I often think about this in September, right? All those moments where you had your kids with you. It was like the house changes so much. It's all based around what they're doing often. So what does it feel like to be an empty nester? If you want to weigh in, 788-3205. Heather Wells is here right now, though, with headlines.
Good morning. Winnipeg's birthing center is struggling to hit its target number of 500 births a year. In fact, it has yet to even hit 50% capacity, topping out at just 237 babies born in its best year. The center, now known as ODIMIN, caters to women with low-risk pregnancies inside the Winnipeg Regional Health Authorities. The executive director there says they simply don't have the ability to do more without more resources. And record-breaking day yesterday, but that's not all positive. In northern Manitoba, the shortage of snow and cold weather has some communities in a crisis. In Shamattawa First Nation, they are struggling with a shortage of fuel because it can't get in on winter roads because the winter roads haven't been built. We'll hear more in our next local news at 7:30.
Thank you very much, Heather.
You're
It
welcome.
is misty -2 in Winnipeg. We've had patchy fog. Actually, it was pretty heavy about an hour ago. A high of 1 degree. If you're seeing any issues on the commute, maybe the fog's part of that, or maybe it's the conditions overall, let us know. 788-3093 if there's any incidents to report. Today's high in the city is going to be 1 degree, as mentioned. So not as warm as yesterday, but still mild. In the next hour of Information Radio, Mark Hennick in our mental health column is coming up. Today, there's a new advisory from the New York Commissioner of Health and Mental Hygiene, and it warns about the impact of social media on the mental health of young people. So it's the first time a large American city has looked through this through that lens. So we'll hear more about that. In addition, there's an exhibition in Winnipeg that goes beyond the beat of music to explore activism and change. CBC's Jim Agapito is going to take us there. Stay tuned. And there's been a bit of a development in the inquest into the killing of a South Sudanese man killed by police in 2019 in Winnipeg. We're going to talk to a lawyer about it. Hi, Deb.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Alberta's premier is wading into controversial matters in her province. It involves educators and how often they should contact parents to advise them on their child's gender expression. Premier Danielle Smith says she is ready to set classroom policy, and as Julia Wong tells us, she announced the broad strokes on social media.
I wish to address a very sensitive issue involving our children and gender identity.
In a 7-minute video posted online,
Alberta Premier Danielle Smith outlines new policies for young transgender Albertans. She is banning top and bottom gender-affirming surgeries for kids 17 and under, and puberty blockers and hormone therapies will not be allowed for those 15 and under.
Prematurely encouraging or enabling children to alter their very biology or natural growth poses a risk to that child's future that I, as Premier, am not comfortable with permitting in our province.
Smith also announced a classroom pronoun policy. Parents need to give consent if their child 15 and under wants to change their name or pronoun. If the kids are older, parents must be notified, but consent is not required. John Hilton O'Brien is the Executive Director for Parents for Choice in Education.
She's trying to strike a balance. She's saying below this age, you need parental consent. Above that age, you need only inform the parents.
So these policies that are being introduced are draconian.
Dr. James Makokis is from the Saddle Lake Cree Nation. He is Two-Spirit, a term used in Indigenous communities to describe a person's gender, sexual, and spiritual identity.
It's putting Alberta in the place of being this wild, wild west province that nobody will want to live in who has any understanding and sense of social progression in the modern world.
More details are expected from Smith at a press conference in Calgary this afternoon. Julia Wong, CBC News, Edmonton.
The European Union's 27 countries have reached a new deal to deliver aid to Ukraine. The package is worth 50 billion euros. European Council President Charles Michel says that support will lock in long-term predictable funding for Ukraine and sends a clear message to Russia. Ukraine is now, though, trying to draw attention to a problem it says has been ongoing since Russia's full-scale invasion began in 2022. Ukrainian children are being taken across the border to live in Russia. Now international partners are gathering for a conference in Latvia to plan their rescue. Abby Kodasan reports.
Ukraine's First Lady Olena Zelenska took the stage, speaking through a translator this morning in Riga.
We will fight for each of our stolen children, no matter how many resources are required to do that.
Kyiv is accusing the Kremlin of forcibly removing children throughout the war. It says about 19,500 children are now in Russia. Only 388 have reportedly been brought back to Ukraine.
At this rate, it will take us 50 years to bring all the children back.
Ilya was one of them. He was taken from Mariupol. He says he was shocked and didn't understand what was happening. Russia says it actually has 700,000 Ukrainian children, but they were taken for their own safety. A child psychologist for some of the rescued kids, Olena Skripko, told CBC News the Kremlin's reasons are much more nefarious.
They said to them that nobody needs you, your parents don't need you. They tried to raise any identity, not just Ukrainian nation, but also to family.
The evidence enough that last March, the International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants for Russian President Vladimir Putin and Russia's Commissioner for Children's Rights. The forced transfer and deportation of children is a war crime. Abby Kwaddasan, CBC News, London.
Protesting in the streets of Bangkok, Thailand this morning, exiles from Myanmar are marking the third anniversary of the military takeover and the ousting of elected leader Aung San Suu Kyi. My World Report co-host John Northcott has been paying close attention to this story. And John, this is a country torn apart by civil war. Where do they stand now?
Marcia, the figures from Myanmar, formerly known as Burma, are stark. With an estimated 50,000 dead, 2.6 million people displaced from their homes, a coalition of opposition, rebel, and ethnic groups are, by all accounts, winning the fight against the military government. Life for the average person is described as very difficult, with some 18 million people in need. This as the military airstrikes and shelling destroy homes, schools, healthcare facilities, temples, and mosques. We've seen many forced over the borders into neighboring countries. All this creating tensions with Myanmar's neighbors, both India and China, who worry about the security of their territory and about overall regional stability.
So on this third anniversary, what is the world saying?
Well, Marcia, as we all know, the world has a lot on its mind these days. With the crisis in the Middle East and the ongoing war in Ukraine, late yesterday, a joint statement from Canada, the EU, Australia, and UK, United States, among others, condemning, quote, the military regime's ongoing atrocities and human rights violations, sexual and gender-based violence, and calling on the junta to cease violence against civilians and to include all stakeholders in what they describe as inclusive dialogue. But for now, there's no sign the violence in Myanmar will end anytime soon.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, Marcia.
My co-host, John Northcott, in studio. At the Vatican, new measures to protect whistleblowers go into effect today. It's part of the Pope's plan to make the church more transparent. Megan Williams has the details from Rome.
Over the past weeks, Pope Francis has spoken out against war, pornography, and surrogacy. But today marks his latest move in his crusade against corruption at home, inside the Vatican. The new rules stipulate that any Vatican employee, contractor, or consultant be provided with clear procedures and a dedicated email address where they can report suspicious spending or accounting statements. The rules require whistleblowers to give their name. In return, the Vatican's Auditor General has to safeguard their identity and the information and get back to them within 3 months to let them know what they've done with the complaint. The Vatican stressed whistleblowing should be for serious offenses only, not for petty gripes against a boss or coworker. The new norms were laid out in a 7-page legal document published last month and are part of the Pope's effort to clean up Vatican financial practices. They come a month after a Vatican court convicted 9 people, including a cardinal, of fraud and embezzlement. Megan Williams, CBC News, Rome.
The World Health Organization is calling it a global burden. It's talking about cancer. A new report from the WHO's International Agency for Research on Cancer finds a majority of countries don't adequately fund cancer screening and palliative care services. That includes for breast cancer, and it's one of the most prevalent forms of the disease. Dr. Freddie Bray is the head of the IARC's Cancer Surveillance Branch. He says that lack of services can lead to other health problems.
Changes in breast cancer screening can actually inflate the incidence, increases in obesity, increases in sedentary lifestyle, and so forth.
The report also predicts a 77% increase in new cancer cases globally by the year 2050. Finding a home to rent is harder and more expensive than ever in Canada, and that is something you may already know. But new figures from the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation confirm that, as Aaron Collins tells us, Albertans are having the toughest time.
It's a crisis, and it's terrifying and heartbreaking.
Karen Whiteman is on the front lines of Canada's rental crunch. Her organization, Unison, helps seniors in Alberta find housing.
People come in and say, I don't know where I'm going to live. No, I sold my house, I'm renting now, or I want to move into an apartment, and they just can't get in, or they just can't afford it.
Alberta saw the biggest drop in rental vacancy rates in the past year. Calgary saw the highest rent increases in the country, ballooning more than 14%. A perfect storm for people with lower incomes like seniors and students. Mathieu Salmassi is with the University of Calgary's Student Union.
We've got students living in their cars if they can't find an alternative. Some are renting Airbnbs because they have nothing else.
Megan Reed is with the poverty reduction group Vibrant Calgary. She says a lack of rental units is forcing some Calgarians onto the streets.
They have leveraged absolutely every asset they have. They're probably in an overcrowding or couch surfing situation, and they're barely holding on.
This rental crisis is being driven in part by inflation and high interest rates, pressures that are expected to ease somewhat this year. But a lack of housing is the biggest problem, and that will take more time to solve. Aaron Collins, CBC News, Calgary.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime. CBCnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Hey everyone, welcome to a brand new month. It is February and it's going to remain mild in Manitoba. Not quite like yesterday where we broke records all over the place. Abby with the forecast in a moment, and we'll talk a bit about the records we broke. Right now in the city, -2. We have had some early morning fog, so take care if you're out there driving. This hour on the show at 10 to 8. Last week on the program, we heard an exclusive from the family of a South Sudanese man killed by police in 2019 in Winnipeg. They say that they've been waiting for almost 5 years for an inquest into his death. This morning, this hour, we're going to talk to the family's lawyer about the inquest, the delays, and what she would like to see happen. There's been a bit of a development in a meeting that was held yesterday, so we'll have that for you before 8. In addition, the CBC's Jim Agapito is going to take us to an exhibition in the city that goes beyond the beat of music to explore activism and change. It's at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. So we'll hear all about that as well. You're with Information Radio on CBC, 89.3, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube. And let's go to Heather Wells to find out what's making headlines.
Good morning. Well, surprise and shock for people in Boissevain after the largest seizure of narcotics on the prairies happened near their town. Border officers seizing more than 400 kilos of what's believed to be meth from a semi-trailer on January 14th. That semi was trying to enter Canada through the border south of Boissevain. Roxanne Wozni lives in Boissevain and is glad the drugs didn't make it to their streets and didn't make it to their kids. Well, how warm was yesterday where you were? 24 warm weather records were smashed in southern Manitoba yesterday. Environment Canada says McCreary reached 12.1. Morden and Winkler were both 11.3. Winnipeg, however, did not break a record because Environment Canada says the official temperature is taken at the airport, not at the warmer Forks. So Abby will have more on that for you, and we'll have more on how this warm weather is affecting life in Manitoba coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
Heather, first though, you were talking about the big bust yesterday. I mean, the largest in the prairies.
Yeah.
Deb Bosch wrote into us this morning on Facebook. I actually spoke with her at 7 o'clock. She said that this happened 2 miles from her home.
Oh, wow.
So she was just writing, and specifically, she said, please share this on the air. She wrote, thanks to the border agents and RCMP for doing a great job. So wanted to pass that along from a resident in the area yesterday.
Do you know what? This morning, as I do every morning, I was talking to police, and the duty officer also said they did a great job. Like, this really makes an impact on our city.
I know that when we were out in Brandon in 2018 doing Urban Myths, which is our series where we really just go and explore and let people tell us what the myths are about the place where they live, and then we try to debunk them, and hear the stories.
Right.
One of the things that came up then heavily was people worried about crime and drugs on the streets of their rural communities, and specifically in Brandon. At that time, there were some groups really getting involved and off the ground of families that are trying to fight back against what they see as a growing problem. So just interesting geographically to see that this happened from a truck that originated out west. Let's turn to Abby. I should also mention, despite what Heather and I talk about, you can also get more on the stories all the time at cbc.ca/Manitoba. So check it out if you haven't read about that big bust. But Abby is here with the temperatures, the forecast. Hello to you.
I'm good. Looking at the temperatures, I'm just going to take off from where Heather stopped about the records, like Altona reaching 10.4. At the end of January was really, really impressive, as against 1952 that they were just at 5 degrees. So that is really, really nice. Another high number I saw on that record would be the Morden area that actually recorded 11.3 degrees as against what was recorded in 1941, which was at 7.2 degrees. So that was like pretty. Global warming is really with us.
Yeah, I know. There's always the note of concern in our voices, and then the smiling because, as a human being, it's nice to have a warm day. But...
True. And talking about a mild day, it's a mild start to February, though we have a little bit of freezing fog out there, and it might be a little bit breezy as you step out of the house to start your day. Winnipeg is currently sitting at -2 degrees. The fog patches experienced earlier this morning, I can look out the window and tell you it's gradually dissipating, and we're in to see some cloud cover as the day progresses. With a high of +1 degree, it's shaping to be a day of mixed condition. And if we move into the night period, I'm going to tell you that you should expect mainly cloudy skies. So for sky watchers out there, you might not really have a good view of the moon. And the development of the fog would definitely be something you should put into consideration if you are driving, because I always say, look out for the deer.
Yeah.
and cats also.
I'm smiling, but you're actually serious. Do you see a lot of cats in your drive?
Yeah, I see a lot of. I don't know what they're doing outside. It's cold.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's a cat.
Well, they're resilient.
At some point, I think it's a squirrel, but it's a cat.
Yeah. Watch out for everything.
So Winnipeg currently we're at -2 degrees.
788-3093 is where you can call. Corey, we've trumped your whole traffic report.
Yeah, see you later. Just call the number. No, yeah, I mean, really, it was a foggy morning. I could feel those ice crystals on my face yesterday. It was this morning as I was going out. Maybe it's cleared a little bit since then, but just be careful when you are hitting the roads or the bike lanes or the sidewalks. A little slippery on the sidewalks as well, or a little slushy, kind of depending on what part of the sidewalk you're on. But if you do see anything going on, it's been very quiet out there. Heard that it's pretty decent on the rapid transit bike lanes from down on a bike, but a little slippery in some spots. So do look out for that. If you see anything else going on out there, give me a call. That number 204-788-3093.
Well, as I mentioned off the top of the clock, last week, New York City Commissioner of Health and Mental Hygiene issued an unconventional advisory about young people and the use of social media. He urged adults to pay special attention and be protective of youth mental health. Now, that means encouraging healthy habits around social media use, but also modeling the same. New York City Mayor Eric Adams spoke to the issue as well. For his part, Mayor Adams described social media as, quote, a public health hazard, end quote. So given that this is somewhat new, as we mentioned, and unconventional in terms of a health advisory, Mark Hennick is here to weigh in. He is our mental health columnist. Hi.
Good morning.
So tell us about this advisory. What does it actually say?
Sure. So last week, the New York Commissioner of Health and Mental Hygiene, as you mentioned, issued an advisory on the dangers of social media to our mental health, especially among children and teens. Now, the advisory lays out a number of background reasons why they took this action. One, that youth mental health appears to be declining. There have been significant increases in hopelessness and suicidal ideation over the last decade. Two, that social media has become so ubiquitous that more than 3/4 of high schoolers spend 3 or more hours a day on the platforms. And then three, the U.S. Surgeon General just last spring issued his own advisory stating, quote, that there are ample indicators that social media can also have a profound risk of harm to the mental health and well-being of children and adolescents. Now, in his State of the City address last Wednesday, here's how New York City Mayor Eric Adams talked about their initiative.
We are the first major city in America to take this step and call out the danger of social media like this, just as the Surgeon General did with tobacco and guns. We're treating social media like other public health hazards, and it must stop. We must ensure that tech companies take responsibility for their products.
So, here we have the biggest city in the United States using some strong words about big tech and the negative impacts that it has, that their social media platforms have on the mental health of kids and teens. So I think that's pretty significant.
Now, as he said, they're also the first to do this, the first major American city. Why should this matter, or how should this resonate, do you think, in Canada?
Well, I think really this is just the latest in a developing story about both our growing understanding of how social media impacts mental health, but also about how social media as we know it today is changing. It's evolved over time, and I think becoming arguably more predatory. I mentioned the U.S. Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy. In his advisory last spring, he referenced evidence which showed that 12 to 15-year-olds who spend 3 or more hours a day on social media, they have double the risk of depression and anxiety. And remember, the data shows us that that's exactly what's happening, with some kids actually spending considerably longer. Here in Canada, we have recent Canadian research which has actually shown that some parents report their kids are on social media for over 12 hours a day. Now, StatsCan released an analysis just last year from a sample of over 13,000 Canadian teens, and they found a close association between the frequency of social media use and lower mental health, especially eating disorders, suicidal ideation, and suicide attempts. Now, these were partly explained by how social media disrupts our sleep, but they were also partly explained by the fact that cyber victimization and bullying becomes much more likely the more time you spend on these platforms.
What about the correlation going on, from another perspective here? Might depression, for instance, drive social media use?
Yeah, I think that's an entirely reasonable hypothesis. Some people will use social media as an escape when they're already feeling depressed and anxious. Sometimes I think even when we don't realize, maybe especially when we don't realize, our behaviors are influenced by our attempts to soothe ourselves, to distract ourselves. Sometimes we're trying to connect with or signal others with respect to how we're feeling. And maybe even we might even do it to avoid situations that are causing stress. So we almost hide out, paradoxically, in social media. I think that probably does play into this, but the balance of evidence really seems to suggest that depression in particular is a side effect of social media use. And a number of studies now have provided fairly clear directional evidence for this impact.
Now, every generation seems to worry about the dangers of technological innovations that emerge in our lifetimes. Video games were during my generation, for example, all the worry. Might that also be happening here or not?
I don't think so. I don't think this is just another case of pearl clutching. We've been watching the unfolding of social media from the beginning. And really, while it used to be novel and exciting and fun, and it's been around for a while now, and it's been changing. I think much of it seems to have become, at least from my personal perspective, to be a bloated, clunky corporate grab to commodify your attention. Maybe I'm just getting older, but I can't help but feel like it's all just a net waste of time now. The content has almost become secondary to the click. So the purpose of modern social media anyway really seems to be just to draw you in and sell you stuff. And I'm really starting to question the value of that exchange. Your attention is the single most valuable resource in the world, and it's non-renewable. You're going to die someday, and the attention factory that you carry around in your head with you, it's going to go too. So even just sometimes, when you pick up your phone and you find yourself mindlessly scrolling, try to ask yourself, does this really deserve my attention more than other things that I actually care about? Then I think you can put down your phone and go do something you actually care about. I think that's how we can have a healthier relationship with social media. You can use it as needed without letting it use you.
Mark, thank you for this.
Thank you.
That is Mark Hennick. He is our mental health columnist here at CBC. By the way, if you have an idea for any of our columnists, please let us know. So our medical columnist, Dr. Raj Bhardwaj, our mental health columnist, Mark Hennick. We also regularly cover federal politics. Every Tuesday morning, we hear what's going on in the Hill. So if you hear something from politicians that relates to you as a Manitoban and you want an answer, pitch us, 788-3205.
Whether you're hanging out or out on the move, stay in the know with CBC Listen. The cost of living with Paul Havershrud goes beyond facts and figures.
Real estate is the 800-pound gorilla of Canada's economy.
And What on Earth with Laura Lynch explores the climate change crisis, problems, and solutions.
What happened that made you start to think and see climate change differently?
The Cost of Living and What on Earth. Available now on CBC Listen.
It is 7:24 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. or on the app. So I have a couple things to go through with you listeners. I do have to inform you that the tickets for The Current, the live taping in Winnipeg, and the following show at the West End Cultural Centre featuring William Prince live in performance, Matt Galloway doing interviews from the stage in Winnipeg, that show at the West End is sold out. So the tickets are free, but you have to reserve a seat, and that went very quickly. So that is sold out. However, next week we will have some tickets that we'll be able to give away. So Matt is going to be on the program next week. We're going to talk to him to talk about what they're going to be covering when they're here in Winnipeg with The Current, CBC's national show that's on the air here right after our program daily. So we're going to have Matt on the air, and then we will have some tickets. So make sure you're listening next week if you're someone that hoped to get a ticket to that and you didn't. And speaking of things you can win. Yesterday, we were talking all about the Ironman curling Bonspiel event being postponed, but it is still going to be taking place heading into the Louis Riel long weekend. We are in the spirit of all things curling because we're one of the sponsors of that event. So we have these wonderful prize packs of CBC swag. So we've got the logo on the toque and a shirt with the logo, a mug and a bag. Really nice little prize pack for the winter. And we have 3 of them to give away, or I should say we had 3 of them. We now have 2. Yesterday's winner of our contest was Tracy Howitt. Tracy, woohoo! true. Corey has contacted Tracy, and the prize pack will go to her. Want to just mention we have two others. So how did Tracy win? Well, she called our listener line, and she gave us her best hurry hard. I'm not that great at it, but maybe you're better. So show us your stuff, won't you? 788-3205. Give us your best hurry hard, and maybe you could win one of those remaining 2 prize packs from here at CBC. Up next on the program, it is time for morning sports. And yesterday, before we turn our attention to Scott Regehr with the developments in the Bombers, let's just hear a little bit about fan reaction to what was made official yesterday. Chris Streveler is returning, and he is a fan favorite. We actually pulled some sound this morning of him coming back after the 2019 Winnipeg Grey Cup, and this is him returning to our Winnipeg airport. Hello, Scott Regehr.
Hello.
So just a little bit of a clip for him, of course, there. People calling him Strevy, and he is a fan favorite. What are your thoughts on this? What's the analysis here?
Well, it was a chance for me to play Peaches and Herb. I wonder if Streveler's a fan. I suspect maybe not, but in any case, he's got plenty of fans, as we just heard, in the province, and they're going to get a chance to cheer him on in blue and gold for at least one more year. So he spent the past 4 seasons, Marcy, in the NFL. Streveler has agreed to play next season back in Winnipeg, where he will be reunited with Zach Collaros, who he combined with to win the Bombers the 2019 Grey Cup, of course. But popularity contests aside, Marcy, I love this signing for the Bombers, since Streveler will be a true 1A option to Collaros at quarterback, and someone that can save Collaros, who's had his share of injuries, concussions included, needless wear and tear. If you have a short yardage situation, Streveler's going to come in and use his legs, as he's done so many times in the past, to get the first down, and Collaros won't need to. We're going to see they really respect each other. They get along great, Collaros and Streveler, with the passing accuracy of Zach, with the running ability and strong arm of Chris Streveler. It's great news on a number of fronts, and I think including Zach Collaros' longevity. Now, he's only on the books for 1 season for $120,000 in incentives, which is pretty good. But let's hope, at least I hope from where I sit, that this is going to turn into a longer-term deal, and maybe there's a succession that might take place there. We'll see.
Yeah, I think it's really good news, actually, and for the vibe of the club as well. Yeah. So they had really good vibes in 2019, as we know. I covered that Grey Cup, and we did interviews sort of with them as groups, which was unusual. So all the quarterbacks came together, and they talked about their relationships. Yeah. So you're right to point out Collaros and Streveler and what that dynamic was like. Mm-hmm. Paid off on the field, for sure. Let's go over to some major developments in golf.
Yeah, the PGA Tour, Marcy, has struck a massive investment deal with a group of U.S.-based sports team owners. The Strategic Sports Group, or SSG, is backed by, among others, the owners of the Boston Red Sox and New York Mets, as well as the NFL's Atlanta Falcons, and will invest over $3 billion into the PGA, and that's just to start with. The idea here is to give men's pro golf a way forward that is not dependent on the Saudi-backed LIV Tour. Many players, of course, have issues with the Saudi government's history of human rights violations. That said, the framework of this SSG deal does leave the door open for possible negotiations with the Saudis as well going forward. Former world number 1 Jordan Spieth was asked whether he thinks that's now likely.
The short answer is we don't have to. We have members that feel strongly on both sides. And so until that would be able to be solved, and that would be number 10 on the list of 10 things, it would be a situation that we should try to have, but I'm not sure, if or how or when it would get done.
Spieth says players should try to have a relationship with the Saudis as well, but not all players feel that way. Last June, many, Marcy, were shocked when the Tour and the Saudis announced plans to partner up, leading Congress and the U.S. Justice Department regulators to investigate that deal. So the LIV Tour continues its normal operations, led by one of its biggest coups, former number 1 John Rahm. The season starts tomorrow in Mexico. That tournament going head-to-head with one of the PGA's signature events, the Pebble Beach Pro-Am. And so the rivalry between tours, Marcy, continues on and away from the fairways. And we can talk more about this next hour, but in hockey, big trade last night. The Canucks top in the league, bringing in Elias Lindholm from the Calgary Flames. How are the Jets going to respond? I think we have an arms race ahead of us here ahead of the trade deadline.
All right. Thanks, Scott. Take care.
You too.
Your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it is the 1st of February. The warm weather just continues. A high in Winnipeg today of 1. Well, surprise and shock among people in Boissevain after the largest seizure of narcotics on the prairies happened near their town. Border officials announcing yesterday they had seized more than 400 kilos of what's believed to be meth from a semi-trailer on January 14th. That semi was trying to enter Canada through the border crossing south of Boissevain. Officials say the suspected drugs amount to about 4 million individual doses of meth with an estimated street value of more than $50 million. Roxanne Wozni lives in Boissevain.
As long as they seize it and they get the stuff, then, that's good because you don't want it on their streets for our kids.
The 29-year-old truck driver from Winnipeg has been charged and is due in court today. Winnipeg's birthing center is struggling to hit its target number of 500 births a year. It has yet to even hit 50% capacity, topping out at just 237 babies born in its best year. The center, now known as Odamin, caters to women with low-risk pregnancies who live within the Winnipeg Regional Health Authority. Executive Director Kemlyn Nemhard says without more resources, they don't have the ability to do more.
I would love to be doing 500 births a year, but to safely do that, we need more funding. We would need a lot more supports to be able to do that. And so, in a lot of ways, we need more midwives trained in the province, more funding for midwives, and more supports for the birth center assistants.
Midwife shortages have plagued the center and Manitoba for years. According to the WRHA, roughly a quarter of women who want a midwife aren't able to get one. The World Health Organization calls it a global burden. It's talking about cancer. A new report out this morning from the WHO's International Agency for Research on Cancer finds a majority of countries do not adequately fund cancer screening and palliative care services. That includes for breast cancer, one of the most prevalent forms of the disease. Dr. Freddie Bray is the head of the IARC Cancer Surveillance Branch. He says the lack of services can lead to other health problems.
Changes in breast cancer screening can actually inflate the incidence, increases in obesity, increases in sedentary lifestyle, and so forth.
The report also predicts a 77% increase in new cancer cases globally by the year 2050. You can hear more on this story as well as other national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. Well, warm weather records were melting right across Manitoba yesterday. 24 records were broken. Environment Canada meteorologist Chris Stammers says the warmest spot in Manitoba was McCreary at 12.1 degrees. That broke a record set back in 1993 of 9.4. Next in line, Morden and Winkler, both at 11.3. Altona was 10.4, and Carman rose to 10.1. Now, while the sunshine warmed Winnipeg up yesterday, it was 7.3 at the Forks. We did not break the record of 5.0 set in 1952. That's because the official temperature comes from the airport, which only reached 4.7. A shortage of snow and cold weather has resulted in a shortage of gasoline in some northern communities. In Shamattawa First Nation, it's being called a critical situation. Trina Miles is a medical driver in Shamattawa.
As a medical driver, it's very critical. It's urgent to have gasoline because how are we supposed to get our patients to and from, especially in emergency situations or life-threatening situations?
Miles says the school had to be temporarily closed because buses can't run without fuel. She says gas was expected to be flown in soon, adding the local RCMP is also helping. Well, you won't be seeing Festival du Voyageurs signature snow sculptures up at the site around the city this year. Festival Executive Director Brienne Lavalley-Heckert says they have been watching the weather since October, and there just isn't enough snow to create massive snow sculptures. And ice isn't an option. Lavely Heckert says they have been forced to pivot. Now, artists will use other mediums like hay or branches instead.
With the lack of snow, that we have to be creative with it. And again, it's not something we can control. So just, taking that with as much humility as we can and just doing what we can do.
Lavely Heckert says sculptors from around the world are still coming to Festival. She says the joie de vivre will still be there. It'll just look a little different. You can hear more on warm changes coming to Festival right here on Information Radio with Marcy Marcusa after 8 o'clock. And it is an unusual sound for the last day of January, but then again, it was an unusual January. Golf balls were flying off the tees at Shooters Golf Center in Winnipeg yesterday. The driving range opened in January for the very first time. Manager Isan Sarazani sold about 25 buckets of balls and hopes to keep the range open even through the weekend.
It's just awesome to be outside in January and golfing, enjoy the weather, and it kind of breaks up the winter, so everybody just had a big smile on their faces and everybody was happy.
Sarazani says this week's warm spell means the driving range will have been open at least one day in each of the 12 months. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
I was tempted to take out my clubs and go do that just to say I did it. But
I was thinking when he said everyone's smiling, you would have been smiling out there.
I do enjoy golf, I gotta say. It's true. I've had many a conversation with friends who are like, it's hours and hours, it's boring. You know those folks.
It's a nice way to, burn some calories, your stress, and break up the winter.
I love it. A lot of people say it ruins a, good walk through the park, but to me, one good shot, it's so addicting. You hit one good shot and it's like,
And you heard that sound there? I love it.
I love that sound too. All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, Heather talked about some of the records in our news already. Abby's in to talk more about the forecast today.
Yeah, let's start with Winnipeg. It's misty out there. We've got fog early in the day, but looking ahead into the day, expect mainly cloudy skies with lingering fog patches dissipating later as the rush hour period starts. The current temperature is at -2 degrees, and we have that gentle breeze that might make you feel like it's a bit brisky. So you might just anticipate for that. We're looking at a high of 1 degree today, making it a mild day. And if we look away from the city and other regions in the province, Brandon is misty at -7. It's going to be mostly cloudy with a mix of sun and cloud, and then fog patches dissipating. We'll see a high of 2 degrees. We have light snow in Thompson, -16, mainly cloudy today. Light snow coming your way, and then it's going to clear in the afternoon. You're heading to a high of -6 degrees. Churchill is at -16, cloudy out there. You see a chance of light snow later, and then you'll be headed to a high of -4 degrees. Gimli's seeing fog patches at -2 degrees. Later, it's going to be mainly cloudy, and that fog patches will be dissipating, and you'd head to a high of 2 degrees. Dauphin is misty at -4, heading to a high of 1 degree. Steinbach and Morris are at -3 currently, and they both will be seeing a high of 2 degrees.
All right. Thank you, Abby.
You're welcome.
Once again in Winnipeg, -2. Corey Funk, what's up on the commute? Anything?
Yeah. No, nothing actually so far this morning. I'm so used to this time of year being like, holy smokes, look out. But it's actually been pretty quiet out there. But if you do see something going on, the one thing about this kind of weather, there may be some new potholes showing up. Curious to see what you're seeing. Give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number, 204-788-3093.
All right. Thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
Well, up next on the show, what do Public Enemies, Fight the Power, and Elton John's dazzling stage outfits have in common? Well, some say they inspired activism and change. Their stories are some of many on display right now at a special exhibition called Beyond the Beat, Music of Resistance and Change. It is an interactive exhibit. It's aimed at showing visitors some of the groundbreaking moments in history, like when music broke down barriers for women, or songs that played an instrumental role in social transformation and political change. The exhibit opens in Winnipeg at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights on Friday. CBC's Jim Agapito got a sneak peek of the display before the opening tomorrow.
I'm Julia Peristarakis. I was the lead curator on Beyond the Beat, Music of Resistance and Change.
Take me through the exhibit.
I'm so excited to show it to you. So we start with this sonic experience, you know, a big wow moment. We want people to get excited and think about the scale of music and human rights. And so this is your ticket here to get interaction with the exhibition. You're going to tap it on this circle here.
First off, what is this?
This is an RFID. It's like the tap to pay technology. We're calling it tap to play. And so you're going to tap it. We're going to get performance clips, interview clips featuring some of your favorite artists.
And this is throughout the entire exhibit?
Yes, this is going to be your added music and sound and context for some of the great artifacts we're going to see.
Just go to it?
And tap.
I was representing black music in Canada, understand? So
whoa, and if we look behind us,
we've got Maestro Fresh West talking about
the legend,
breaking barriers in Canadian music and hip hop.
Okay.
You can tap again. We've got Nina Simone.
Amazing. So the way that I guess this is laid out while we walk through here, can you tell me about this?
Yeah.
Punk rock protest, so you give a little bit of history here.
We give some context, and then really a lot of the stories are told through the artifacts. So we've got concert posters here, we've got stage outfits, we've got instruments and so on, buttons even, that really start talking about some of those intersections between music, different human rights, different movements. Punk rock's such a great example of artists that were so progressive. They're really, you know, taking it, you know, sticking it to the man, you know, ignoring capitalist interests, really do it yourself, and kind of screaming about their rights.
Why did the Human Rights Museum want to bring this here?
So of course we know there's so many connections between music and human rights, the way artists and audiences work together to use music as a tool to advance conversations about human rights.
Take me somewhere else.
Sure, yeah. We're looking at We Shall Overcome, Anthems for Racial Justice. But this section really pulls a thread through the American Civil Rights Movement all the way to Black Lives Matter today, looking at the different ways artists and audiences and activists have come together to challenge inequities and violence.
How hard was it to find all of this footage?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big part of our work, right? Like building relationships, going into archives, going into different, figuring out the photos that are going to speak to it.
Okay, let me know what we have over here.
Sure, so this section is looking at different artists responded to racism through music during the Civil Rights Movement. We've got Sam Cooke's ukulele, of course, and this beautiful suit from Oscar Peterson, a renowned Canadian jazz pianist that's on loan from the Canadian Museum of History. One of my favorite sections is this Canadian hip-hop section we have here. It's fun to be able to kind of bring up some of that, nostalgia for people like us in these important moments. We have this novelty-sized boombox that looks at the battle for a black-owned radio station in Toronto that would play kind of black music genres and kind of be a place to share black experiences and black culture. It took them 12 years to finally be successful. It's narrated by Shad.
1990. The Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission wanted to
And then, of course, going with the hip-hop theme, we've got Chuck D's bomber jacket here. We're looking at hip-hop in the U.S. Yeah, and fighting the power.
That's a legendary piece.
Yeah, that one we're pretty excited about, too.
I see a little bit of a space here.
So this is our dance floor. It's one of the most fun aspects of this exhibition.
Okay.
We're looking at dance floors and spaces, gay clubs, but also disco clubs, the spaces of relationship building, political organizing. And the idea is that the more you move your body, the more of the performance video you can see here if you want to give it a try. So if you move, the disco ball disappears with your shape. You got the moves. And then we've got some great Canadian artists. We're looking at how women kind of broke down barriers within the music industry, right? It's Sarah McLachlan. This is her outfit she wore to the Lilith Fair. And she said, you're going to tell me that you can't put two women on a ticket together. I'm going to put a whole festival of women. So this is our last thematic section that looks like how music has been censored and suppressed. As you tap, what's Link Ray doing here? It's revealed. Yeah. And I mean, we talk about lyrics in music. This is a song that had no lyrics. It was banned because the song itself, that tune, they thought could start violence, could start riots.
Ready to rumble.
Ready to rumble. And then we have, of course, Dee Snider, Twisted Sisters, speaking out against censorship more broadly from government, looking to put those offensive content stickers on albums. And artists spoke so passionately against, Washington interfering with their music and censoring them.
Hi, my name is Felix Berry. I'm a co-curator of this exhibition, specifically the resurgence component. I hail from Muscogee First Nation and the Azores.
Okay, take me through a little bit of your exhibit here, okay?
I can build excitement, so it starts off with, well, Willie Dunn. We got some Willie Dunn artifacts here, lyrics from 1971. Notable on one of these lyrics, He Colonized the Mind. We've got Redbone Single, Gold Record, Come and Get Your Love, Guardians of the Galaxy. I was thrown into the deep end with this project. It's the only section of this exhibition that was curated with the help of a committee, the Indigenous Music Advisory Committee, with Fawn Wood, Oliver Boulette, Kimmy Starr, Dave McLeod. We got Rex Smallboy, Best Rap Hip Hop Album for War Party of the Rain. Naughty Nose Rez Kids. They were nominated for their 4th Polaris this year. They won the Prism Pride this year. They signed a deal with Sony this year. This is the Indigenous Women's section. Over here we got the Storytellers and Visionaries. Well, public engagement's a huge part of what we do, and working with Indigenous communities is nothing about us without us. We're working with the community rather than just kind of saying this is what it is from an expert. Really wanted it to just be a celebration of Indigenous excellence in the world of music. I wanted people to see themselves represented in here and to be inspired.
CBC's Jim Agapito getting a sneak peek for us at something that opens tomorrow in Winnipeg, Beyond the Beat. It's the exhibit at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. It opens and runs until the end of September, so tomorrow's day one. The CMHR is bringing in activist Tom Morello of Rage Against the Machine tomorrow to celebrate the opening. Their first tour van is on display as part of this exhibit. It's pretty cool, hey? So that's part of what you can find there. And man, that brought back a lot of memories, just thinking about all those firsts in the 80s and 90s. I know me and my girlfriends traveled proudly to see Lilith Fair in Edmonton at the time when Sarah McLachlan was doing her touring, and when that was innovative and so forward thinking for female artists, so women artists across the country. So if you've got something to add, you can always tune in. You can always weigh in by reaching us here when you're thinking about your own musical history and those moments that you participated in. But I think a lot of people are going to be heading out to this. Beyond the Beat at CMHR opens tomorrow.
Nothing can stop an Iron Man from stepping onto the frozen river to curl. Except the weather. This warm spell means the Ironman Outdoor Curling Bonspiel is being rescheduled to February 16th to 18th. Join us then for the family fun spiel we've all been waiting for. The Ironman Outdoor Curling Bonspiel, now February 16th to 18th, proudly sponsored by CBC.
7:47 a.m. is the time right now, and next a little bit of music on CBC to pick up February 1st and your Wednesday morning. Oh, look at me on your Thursday morning. I'm already taking a day away from us here. Thursday morning already in Winnipeg, clicking through this week. The tune this morning coming to you on 89.3 FM, 990 AM, or on the app. Thanks for listening wherever you are, and thanks for everybody weighing in on YouTube as well. So we're just loading the music. Forecast today looking pretty mild. -2 in Winnipeg, still misty. And the high today is going to be 1 degree. So not quite as warm as we got yesterday, but still a really warm day. We didn't quite break that record if you're just getting up and tuning into all this. But at the airport, it got to 4.7. That's where they look at the records. And we needed to get over 5. So we were close, but man, it felt nice. The Forks temperature in Winnipeg went up to 7.3 degrees. So if we would have looked at that temperature, we certainly would have beat that record. And the music I was mentioning here now for us, this is Callie Cardinal with Light of the Moon.
It was things that I am missing. When the sun goes down, there's still the light of the moon, and I will remember you. Well, I remember you in the bright lights, singing songs into the late night. But we all start to fade, turn to dust. Time catches up with the best of us. When the sun goes down, there's still the light of the moon, and I will remember. If you lived 1,000 years, you'd still be gone too soon. And I will remember you. There's a silence where there was none. Rest easy now, your work is done. The ones that will follow, they bring you with them. We can hear your voice if we just listen.
And we're listening to Kaylee Cardinal this morning, featuring their brothers Landreth with Light of the Moon. That is off Kaylee's new album, Boundless Possibilities. It will be fully released on June 21st. Well, on this February 1st, we have traffic issues developing on your commute, Corey.
Yeah, northbound Pembina, just right around Chevrier. Just got a call from Dean. There's police vehicles there responding to some kind of incident there. We don't know exactly the nature of it or anything like that. It seems to be kind of changing pretty quickly, so not sure exactly which lanes are blocked. So just be careful, be patient if you are heading northbound Pembina towards Chevrier. Seems like there may be some issues there. We'll be keeping an eye on that throughout the rest of the morning. If you see anything else going on out there, 204-788-3093.
All right, thank you for the update.
Thank you.
Well, as you heard in the news, Festival de Voyageurs is having to switch gears because of the lack of snow. The festival starts on February 16th, and while it's still a few weeks away, organizers have been spending months preparing for this in case it's a green festival. Earlier this morning at 7 o'clock, I spoke with the new festival executive director, Brianne Lavallée-Eckhart.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm well. I'm wondering how you are doing with this unusually warm week and not a lot of snow out there. First, how are you feeling about it?
Yeah, well, we've been watching the weather at Festival de Voyageurs since October and have been preparing for worst case scenario. We've seen throughout the year that there hasn't been the levels of snowfall, and over the holiday break, that's the time where we usually can get a lot of that done because there's snow. But as we all know, over the winter holidays, there wasn't a lot on the ground, and we're still not seeing that. And I think the temperatures are supposed to be around 5 degrees over the weekend as well. So, we're learning to pivot. I'm learning to pivot. It's my first year as executive director, and really leaning on the team and their expertise and how they pivoted during COVID, and we're doing that now too. So, yeah.
So, what are the big changes this year because of the weather? Let's start there.
Yeah, so the biggest thing is obviously the lack of snow. I'm sure, just when you're going outside, you can see that there's a difference, and that difference will definitely be felt in the park. Currently at Parc des Voyageurs, as we're setting it up, there's grass that's visible. So, we are, really rolling with the punches with this and just, being as, open as we can to it. It's not something we can control, obviously. So just trying to, be as innovative and creative as we can. So for the snow sculptures, there will be some snow sculptures in the park, but festival goers can be excited to see different sculptures with different mediums as well this year. We were trying to be creative and innovative, and so just explore different options for sculptures. So there's going to be some new ways of experiencing art in the park this year because of the lack of snow.
So what kinds of things? If snow isn't going to be plentiful and ice will melt, what other substances are you thinking about?
Yeah, so we have some artists, the sculptors that we've been working with for years, who are experimenting with different mediums, things like hay, trees, different pieces of sustainability art practices that are going to be implemented. So we were really excited to be able to start having a conversation. Sustainable art is something that I think we all need to be conscious of, and I think the Festival de Voyageurs is really embracing that energy this year, just with the lack of snow, that we have to be creative with it. And again, it's not something we can control, so just taking that with as much humility as we can, and just doing what we can do.
So you said maybe a handful of snow sculptures, otherwise other mediums, and I understand. How many made of ice? Do you have any?
We will have ice sculpting. I don't know if there will be any, if the weather will cooperate for us to have any ice statues in the park at all. We also, sort of waiting to see what the weather will be like. It's 2 weeks away, but also it's Winnipeg, so in 2 weeks we could have, a huge snowfall, and there might, our issue might be that there's too much snow. So
I know you're new in your position, as you mentioned, but I mean, in all the discussions you've been having to prep for this unusual year, do you have an understanding of how unusual it is that we may be talking about a festival with, without snow and ice sculptures aplenty?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's unusual for sure, but for a festival, but within the context of wider conversations in society, right? Like, we have to be talking about impacts of climate change and taking those seriously. And I know it's an El Nino year, but the intensified effects of that definitely come from the real reality of climate change around us. And so, I think that just like for me coming into this role, it's like, okay, like these are real issues in our world, and Festival du Voyageur is an organization that represents our community, is such a huge, iconic part of what it means to be Winnipeg, and part of that is the snow. And so it's not just Festival, but it's Winnipeg as a place. When I think about myself as an Indigenous person here, and I think about Winnipeg as a place where winter comes with specific teachings and stories, and Festival is part of that story now. And so for me, it's the loss of winter, and I think Festival is such an important organization and festival because it builds that relationship with us with the winter, which we otherwise, most of us don't want to go outside in the winter, especially when it's minus 40, minus 50. But yeah, so for me, I think it's really just like being able to guide this organization in the best way that I can. And we're really through all of the different obstacles that we're experiencing in society today, right?
Can I ask you what positives there might be? I mean, I'm thinking about freezing under a tent, listening to music when it gets a bit too cold, and you could have some great party nights if it stays mild. That's my perspective. From yours, though, what positives might there be?
Yeah, exactly that, right? Like if it's, if we have a minus 5, minus 10 day, it's so much nicer to come to Parc du Voyageur and to, you don't have to have everybody in the big snowsuits. And so there are definitely advantages to the milder weather for getting people into the park and everything like that. So we're looking at that is something that we're excited about, because I know that the cold can be a barrier for a lot of folks. So.
Yeah, there's a flip side, right? So can I ask you about the snow machine? I know that in the past you have used that to sort of help out on site. Is that something that you're going to bring out again this year?
So we used the snow machine for the first time this year that we had acquired, I think, in the last year. So before I got there, and we did try using it. It's still something that we're learning how to use, and an eco-responsible way as well. Obviously the snow machine pulls water, and finding sources of water that are appropriate to use in those circumstances. And, there's a whole host of questions that come with the snow machine solving that. So, we're really, it was an investment that we made, and it's something that we need to continue to work with and figure out how we can use it best.
Brianne, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
That's Brianne Lavallée-Eckart, Festival du Voyageur's executive director, and we spoke with her at 7 o'clock this morning to talk about what's going to change for Festival. It runs from February 16th to 25th, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist, as they say, to see that we don't have snow. Not a lot of it, not enough of it anyway. So they're switching gears. Let's get to Heather Wells now for other updates and news.
Good morning. Well, surprise and shock for people in Boissevain. After the largest seizure of narcotics on the prairies happened near their town, border officers seizing more than 400 kilos of what's believed to be meth. Roxanne Wozni lives in Boissevain and is glad those drugs didn't make it to their streets. And Winter Golf in Winnipeg has shooters opening up their driving range for a brisk business. The driving range will stay open this weekend. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 8:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
It is now 1 minute to 8 o'clock. It's -2. It's been misty, foggy, kind of a mixed bag out there. Now it's mostly cloudy downtown. Our high today in the city is 1 degree. And if you see any challenge on your commute, give us a call, whether you're on the highway or in the city, at 788-3093. Stay with us. World Report is next.
on Q with Tom Power.
The British show Top Boy has had an interesting life. The show about London drug dealers ran for 2 highly acclaimed seasons, and then it got cancelled. The creator of the show, Ronan Bennett, will be here to tell you the story of how Drake saved his show and got it back on TV.
My kids knew who Drake was, but I have to confess, it's not my scene.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
It is an idea that is central to many parts of the wellness world. Thinner is better than fatter. Feminist philosopher Kate Mann says not only is that incorrect, but it's an idea that's damaging and even immoral. Kate Mann, coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. People who lived through the mass stabbing on James Smith Cree Nation say they want action to prevent violent crimes. A jury in Saskatchewan agrees. It has released 29 recommendations following a 2.5-week inquiry. They include specific actions for police and the Correctional Service of Canada. The CBC's Sam Sampson brings us a closer look at the recommendations and some reaction.
My sister here, she was a beautiful woman.
Daryl Burns clutches a photo of his sister, Lydia Gloria Burns. She spent her last moments trying to save someone with stab wounds before she was killed. Burns hopes her death and this inquest will keep others from suffering a loss like his.
So if my sister's death means that something positive is going to come out of this, then her legacy is going to live on.
On Wednesday, a provincial inquest jury delivered 29 recommendations to prevent future tragedies. Most were for the RCMP and Correctional Service Canada. There's a push for RCMP to open communications with First Nations leaders, whether it's about wanted persons or how to address drugs and gangs. The jury wants more cultural resources like elders in prisons and continuous support for Indigenous offenders once they get out. Many of these recommendations stem from testimony about the attacker's abusive childhood, his abuse against his common-law spouse, and his time in prison.
I think this inquest took us through a roller coaster.
Family members like Chelsea Stonestand, whose aunt and cousin died, say intergenerational trauma played a part in these attacks, and that's something all Canadians can address.
Talk to your friends, your relatives, and make them aware of these issues that impact all of us. So it doesn't just happen to an Indigenous community. It could happen to any community.
The families hope each organization takes these recommendations seriously, because the hope they feel now won't last long without change. Sam Sampson, CBC News, Melfort, Saskatchewan.
We're expecting to hear more from the head of CSIS, David Vigneault, today, as well as other senior Canadian intelligence figures. They're due to testify at the Foreign Interference Inquiry in Ottawa. China, Russia, India, and other countries are all accused of meddling in Canada's elections. Janice McGregor is in our parliamentary bureau with more on what to expect. And Janice, spies are usually pretty tight-lipped. Any chance we'll get new information today?
Not sure, Marcia. The task today is to grapple with a more fundamental question. How much government decision makers and the public have a right, arguably even need to know, about classified intelligence? A former director of CSIS, Dick Fadden, told the inquiry yesterday that Canada's allies are much more open about their briefings, and he described how Canada's intelligence community could be more transparent.
While much of the information that you will be interested in deserves protection, the culture, the workload, and the tradition in agencies, I think, is to tend towards overprotection. Things tend to be classified more than they need to be.
The key question for this commission this week is whether things can be, even should be, different now. And if spy agencies do share more, how to do that without compromising secret sources or their relationships with international allies.
One of the groups involved in sounding the alarm about foreign interference has already lost faith in this process. Tell us about that.
In a statement late yesterday, the Uyghur Rights Advocacy Project said it was pulling out over the decision of Commissioner Marie-Josée Hug to allow a couple of politicians accused in media and intelligence reports of having close ties to the Chinese Communist Party in Beijing to have full standing at this inquiry. That allows them to see more materials than will be released to the public, and it would allow them to cross-examine the testimony of witnesses from the diaspora communities who come forward to talk about how foreign interference affects their sense of safety. UGG had tried to provide reassurances on Monday about protecting these groups, but she also said that those whose reputations have been attacked do have the right to explain themselves.
Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor reporting from Ottawa. The Houthi army in Yemen says it has hit a U.S. container ship in the Red Sea. It says the vessel was the KOI. It is a Liberian flagged ship. An oil tanker owned by the same company was damaged by a missile on Saturday. U.S. forces also say they put Houthi targets back in their crosshairs this morning. The U.S. says it targeted 10 attack drones and a command station in Yemen. The Houthis say they are targeting Red Sea ships with ties to Israel in support of Palestinians in Gaza. U.S. and U.K. forces say they are trying to protect trade routes. The leaders of the European Union's 27 member nations have agreed on an aid package for Ukraine. It is worth €50 billion, or about 72 billion Canadian dollars. Hungary pushed back for months, but the support is coming at a crucial time for the country. As the second anniversary of Russia's invasion approaches, freelance reporter Ishan Garg is in Brussels with more on the story.
Just hours into the meeting on Thursday morning, a deal was struck. There had been fears that Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán would veto the deal, and it's not yet known how those concerns were overcome. But Ukraine has now secured funding for the next 4 years. Part of the money will be used for running services, while other funds will go towards the country's reconstruction. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says continued EU financial support will strengthen Kyiv's long-term economic and financial stability. Outside the meeting, hundreds of farmers blocked roads in protest. Tractors rolled into Brussels in a demonstration against rising costs and EU laws. Farmers across the continent say those rules have hit their profits. They say the bloc's trade deals could flood the market with cheap imports. Leaders in Brussels say they are listening to those concerns, but that has failed to satisfy the farmers so far. Ishan Garg for CBC News, Brussels.
A man accused of helping people around the world die by suicide is due back in an Ontario court today. Kenneth Law faces 14 counts of first-degree murder and 14 counts of counseling or aiding suicide in the province. Police allege Law sold products intended for self-harm. They are suspected of being linked to 124 deaths worldwide. His lawyers say he will plead not guilty. Starting today, those who are 72 years old and up can apply for coverage under Canada's new National Dental Plan. They are the latest group to be included, but there is still some confusion about how the program will work. And as Marina von Stackelberg reports, some dentists say they're still in the dark.
We're ready imminently to be able to share information with all providers, with all dentists.
Health Minister Mark Holland says negotiations with dental care associations are in their final stages. Dentists can't sign up yet to be a part of the program and still don't know how much they'll be paid, even though they'll be expected to start providing care for patients in May.
And at the core, we want to make sure that dentists are treated fairly, that they have, they're fairly remunerated for their services, that they have clarity in terms of how that process works.
When the program starts, people 65 and older without private health insurance that make less than $90,000 a year will have access to this new publicly funded dental insurance. By 2025, all age groups will be covered, provided they meet certain criteria. Ottawa has been gradually mailing invitations to enroll, starting with the oldest Canadians. So far, more than 400,000 have signed up. Dr. Heather Carr, president of the Canadian Dental Association, says many dentists are keen to take part.
But at this time, it's very difficult for them to make a decision because there's still so many details that haven't been finalized.
Carr says there should be enough dentists in most parts of the country to meet overall demand, but there may be shortages in some regions. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
Later this morning in Toronto's Rollison Community School, it will sound a little like this.
Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening sky.
The elementary and middle school is going to raise the Pan-African flag to mark the start of Black History Month. If you've not seen it, the flag is 3 horizontal stripes, red at the top to represent the blood that unites all people of Black African ancestry, then black for the people, and green to represent the abundant natural wealth of Africa. Laura Lee Eccleston is the school principal.
I keep thinking, wouldn't it be amazing that through the month of February, not only in schools, but throughout our city, throughout our province and country, that we would begin to see public displays of Black liberation through the raising of the Pan-African flag.
Let our rejoicing rise.
As you can hear, the students are excited about this moment. Here they are practicing the Black National Anthem, Lift Every Voice.
As the rolling sea.
That is World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Marcy Marcusa, thanks for joining us this Thursday as we turn the page on a new month. Welcome to February 1st. In Winnipeg, mild again today. Currently in the city, downtown, we're at -2. Yesterday, we broke records in all kinds of different places. So we'll hear more about that. McCreary, I just want to shout you out. You got to 12.1 degrees yesterday. Just incredible. Well, I'll tell you what, on one side, this is nice to be experiencing this mild winter in Manitoba. On the other side of things, of course, it comes with concern about the climate, but also concern for some of the things that we're used to celebrating in the wintertime in Manitoba. One of those is Festival du Voyageur. So what does it mean for the identity of the festival that there's no snow? We talked to the organizer in the last hour about one of the big changes, the Snow Sculpture Symposium. Shifting gears, changing mediums, sculpting with other types of materials because we don't have snow. Gary Tessier is going to join us this half hour. He's been sculpting for some 40 years. He was one of the original people behind creating that Snow Symposium at Festival. So he's going to talk to us all about this and how it's unusual, to say the least. Right now, let's go to Heather Wells, who's here with headlines.
Winnipeg's birthing center is struggling to hit its target number of 500 births a year. It has yet to even hit 50% capacity, topping out at just 237 babies born in its best year. The center, now known as Odaman, caters to women with low-risk pregnancies in the Winnipeg Regional Health Authority. We're going to hear from the executive director, who says without more resources, they don't have ability to do more. A shortage of snow and cold weather, as we've been hearing, has resulted in a shortage of gasoline in some northern communities. Fuel normally is trucked in on winter roads, which are slow to open because of the warm temperatures. In Shamattawa First Nation, it's being called a critical situation. We'll take you there in our next local news at 8:30.
Heather Wells, I have some messages for you.
What?
Well, on YouTube this morning, people are writing in. So people are like, why don't we see Heather? We're getting the camera. But this is my favorite message. Keith wrote in and he said, Heather Wells is mysterious.
Ooh.
CBC has hired a hyper-intelligent celestial being beyond comprehension to the human mind. She's like the northern lights, a gossamer curtain of dazzling color. Right?
It is kind of cool working with an orb, just because that kind of floats around the newsroom.
I go with orb, yeah.
I think that's the best review ever. I love that, Keith. Who is that poetic in the morning? Like,
yeah,
honestly.
It's something you really don't need to see.
Stop right now. Keith, big thumbs up to you. Thanks for that fun comment.
That is
on
pretty
YouTube.
funny.
I love that. We heard Corey Funk. We're going to go to Corey in a moment for the commute. Let's actually turn our attention, though, to Abby Adeyemi, who's here with our forecast.
Yes, still mild start of February. Last night, Marcy, I was on the Weather Channel, and I was just checking out what was happening on Nat Geo Wild, and this piece came up about the El Nino, and it caught my attention because it was talking about the weather patterns, and a number came up and said it usually happens between 2 to 7 years, but it's not predictable when it hits, right? And then the person talking about it said, this goes on and it affects warmer climates, and they
Yes.
get unnecessarily cold.
Yeah,
And
which speaks to our interview yesterday about El Niños and how, that's why it's so difficult to know. At the beginning of the winter, they tell us what they think it'll be like, but they really can change things drastically.
And something important came up in that interview, which is related to our next interview, because these also affected the Olympics in 2010 in Vancouver. They were expecting it to be, the Winter Olympics was supposed to be cold, but it was warm.
I forgot
so
about
it affected that. That's also
That's the one where Manitoba's John Montgomery won the medal, remember? And he walked through the village.
Exactly.
Yeah, in Skeleton. What a year that was.
Anyway, let's now come back to Winnipeg as we head into the rush hour. The current temperature stands at -2 degrees. We have cloud covers all across the city, and of course some fog patches here and there, with a high of -1 degrees. We're expecting a mix of sun and cloud. Tonight, Winnipeg, get ready for a mainly cloudy sky, and then the development of fog patches would creep in later. If we just have a sneak peek into Friday, we should expect a mix of sun and cloud, and the fog patches will definitely dissipate as the morning starts. The wind will pick from the south, and tomorrow we're going to be seeing a high of 2 degrees. But right now, Winnipeg is currently at -2.
All right, thanks very much, Abby.
You're welcome.
Let's get into the conditions out there, whether you're walking or driving or biking.
Yeah, earlier I was getting calls about police responding to an issue on northbound Pembina near Chevrier. There's a bit of an update there. So they're actually blocking both northbound and southbound Pembina between Manahan and Adamar, which is near Chevrier. The emergency crews are blocking that southbound median and northbound curb lanes. So keep left if you're going northbound, southbound, keep right to get around that as police kind of respond to an incident there. But if you do see anything else going on there, that seems to be the only kind of major issue to keep an eye out for. But if you see something, let me know. That number to call, 204-788-3093.
Well, my next guest is behind some of the most iconic snow sculptures that you've probably seen in the city of Winnipeg. He's been sculpting for some 40 years. He was one of the co-creators of the Snow Symposium at Festival de Voyageurs back in the day. We are talking this morning about the lack of snow and how that's going to affect Festival. As you've been hearing in the news, they're having to pivot, switch gears in quite an extreme way that we've never seen before. They're talking about needing the sculptors to use other materials to create their art because of the lack of snow. So we wanted to get Gary on the line and hear a little bit more about this. Hi, Gary.
Good morning, Marcy.
Wow, right? What's your reaction? What a year.
Yeah, it is exceptional. I mean, I've seen some strange years over the course of the last 40, but this year and the duration of the warmth that we're having right now pre-Festival is quite exceptional.
Yeah, and I heard that you've already done some sculpting around town in some neighborhoods and just really been watching them melt.
Yeah, there's three of us that I've been working with over the last number of years. We're working on some pieces that were sponsored by Qualico in the communities. And involved with that is also a workshop with local school children in the community. And we just did one in Sage Creek and haven't quite finished it yet because of the conditions. We're waiting to see what will be left so that we can sort of finish it up based on school designs by the kids there. And we've got a few other that are blocks that are up throughout the city here, again sponsored by Qualico, and that we're supposed to be tackling, but we're putting a hold on that until for the next week and a half, to see if the weather will change somewhat, and then we can tackle them, because there's no sense in digging into those blocks right now.
What is this going to mean for the artists? I mentioned you helped help create back in the day the Snow Symposium that we're all so fond of and used to seeing at Festival de Voyageurs. Part of what people might not remember is that this is local artists like yourself, but it's also, it's an international symposium. What do you understand about the artists and the sculptors that we're planning to be here for this year, or how it will affect them?
Well, I haven't been involved in organizing that for a few years now, but I do know a number of the ones that have participated, and know of some of them that were coming out this year. Franzi from Germany, and there's Bob Folks from Detroit from the States, and a few others. And they've been participating on a circuit right now in the States in snow sculpting events. And coming up to Winnipeg here, certainly to expect to work in snow, and they've been here before. But I'm sure the festival has warned them that there's going to be some changes. And these are sculptors. These are artists that have worked in all kinds of mediums, including hay, wood, stone, whatever. And there has been talk in the past when we had a few soft years that should the festival consider having the artists work in other materials like hay. And hay is traditionally done throughout the world in various events, and they call them fire sculptures, actually, because they make a structure and wrap it in hay and then burn them at the end of the event.
Well, actually, there was a large lantern made of hay that displayed in the city of Selkirk this year as part of their winter seasonal festivals. And they're planning, I understand, on burning it in March. I've been in contact with Dave Pankow about it because they're still in the works of what they're going to do. It was the first that I'd heard of that. So super interesting. These are also huge, the same kind of scale, at least this lantern was, as the snow sculptures. This might be making Manitobans feel a little bit better, because when we hear artists pivoting from snow to other mediums, it sounds like that would be impossible. But what you're saying is most of the sculptors, are going to have some of that experience to bring.
Oh, no, the ones that come here generally do not work in snow. This is the one opportunity where they get to work on a very large scale, because there's no other medium that you can work so large, except for perhaps hay, in such a short period of time. So this is really a fun event for everybody, because they come out here, they get to meet each other after 11-month hiatus, and work on a piece, but on a scale that they could never do in their regular mediums like stone or bronze or anything else. So they'll absolutely be able to pivot.
We might see some fantastic new things then, right? Let's bright side this.
we have to look forward to this. I mean, I love working in snow. I've been doing it for a number of years, and it's a bit of a pilgrimage every year, and I get to work with some really great people on these things. But I will admit that I'm also enjoying the warmer weather this year as a bit of a break. But I do miss working in snow. I'll admit that. But no, I think there's some opportunities that will come out of this, and we'll certainly have Festival having to look at the future and how they're going to tackle it.
Yeah, if we have more of these unusual winters, and as climate change affects the whole world here. Just last, Gary, are you going to have to pivot yourself as well? You're thinking about the school programs that you're working with, and you're out and about in community trying to make your sculptures?
Yeah, we'll have to look at different options as well, too. Snow is an awful lot easier to work with the kids. The hay and those structures might be, because we're working with children right now that are in elementary school, grades 4 and 5, 6, that kind of thing. The other materials will present other challenges, but part of the workshops was working in plasticine and those kinds of things to give the kids the idea of how we tackle these initially, and that's been a lot of fun. But no, it's an opportunity for us to recalculate and take a look at what we're going to be doing ahead of the future years.
Thank you very much for weighing in, Gary, and all the best. And thanks for all the beauty you've brought to us over the years with your sculptures.
Oh, you're most welcome. Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. That's Gary Tessier. He has been a snow sculptor for some 40 years. He also, back in the day, helped to create the Snow Symposium that we've come to understand as part of one of the regular things we look forward to at Festival de Voyageurs. Well, we will have to be looking forward to new things this year. We heard from Festival de Voyageurs Executive Director earlier in the program this morning, and she said, Brianne Lavely-Eckert, that they are pivoting with their sculptors. They're asking them to create sculptures in other media. The festival runs from February 16th to February 25th.
Nothing can stop an Ironman from stepping onto the frozen river to curl. Except the weather. This warm spell means the Ironman Outdoor Curling Bonspiel is being rescheduled to February 16th to 18th. Join us then for the family fun spiel we've all been waiting for. The Ironman Outdoor Curling Bonspiel, now February 16th to 18th, proudly sponsored by CBC.
In Winnipeg, we are expecting today a high of 1 degree with increasing cloud throughout this morning. And it is certainly cloudy downtown right now in the city. Tonight, that cloud cover is going to stay with us, low -2. And tomorrow, mix of sun and cloud. And for our Friday, a windy day, actually, and a high of 2 degrees. Looking at some of the records set yesterday, McCreary 12.1. Here in Winnipeg, we didn't quite get to a record. That's because they measured the airport. We got to 4.7. We needed to crack 5 at least. 6 would have been a record. At the Forks in Winnipeg yesterday, it was 7.3 degrees. That would have been a record, but again, they are measuring at the airport. The previous record was set in 1952 in Winnipeg when the airport temperature was 5 degrees. But what a warm day all across the province. Just incredible. Festival de Voyageurs. I mentioned that we're trying to bright side things as we look at pivoting from the snow sculpture aspect of Festival. But of course, one of the other things is you won't be freezing and uncomfortable if you head out for a night of music. Music is such a big part of Festival de Voyageurs under the tents and at various venues all around the city as well, and especially through St. Boniface. This year, you can catch this artist performing at Festival. You can look forward to Andrina Turen. Here she is with Out of Luck. And Joanna Turan and Adelac on CBC performing at Festival de Voyageurs, as so many artists are as well. So you can check out online to see the full lineup of a Festival for this year. Of course, it runs from February 16th to 25th. We'll hear more about those pivots they're having to make because of warm weather coming up in the news. News is right around the corner here on CBC. And then The Current is coming up. They're continuing their series this morning on wellness. They're having a conversation about a new book that examines fat phobia today and anti-fat bias in our society. The author says we need to stop seeing fatness as a moral issue. Matt Galloway will have that conversation on The Current this morning. Small mention here. I know I mentioned it earlier in the program, but in case you missed it, a lot of you were really hoping to get tickets to see Matt when he's live in Winnipeg, the West End Cultural Centre. He's doing a show live from there one evening. It's going to be awesome. William Prince is performing, and he's also doing 2 shows here, actually. So that's the second night. First night, he's doing just all Winnipeg stories, all Manitoba-based stories, and he'll be doing that here out of CBC in our studios. We know now that show at the West End Cultural Centre is sold out. But I can tell you that next week, Matt's going to be on our show, and I'm sure he's going to bring along some tickets. In fact, I know he's going to bring along some tickets. So we'll tell you, you'll have a chance to win next week, and you'll have to be tuning in. Right now, your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 8:30. A little bit of mist out at the airport this hour. It is -2 in Winnipeg, February 1st, and we're headed to a high of 1. People in Boissevain are shocked to learn the biggest narcotics bust on the prairies happened near their town. Border officers seized more than 400 kilos of what's believed to be meth from a semi January 14th. Those drugs inside large suitcases in the semi, trying to enter Canada through the border south of Boissevain. Haven Couvelier lives in the town of 1500.
It's crazy to me. I would never expect anything like that to happen this close to Boissevain.
The semi-driver, a 29-year-old man from Winnipeg, was arrested, turned over to RCMP, and he will be in court today. Investigators say they don't yet know where that semi was coming from, only that it was headed from the U.S. to Winnipeg. Winnipeg's birthing center is struggling to hit its target number of 500 births a year. It has yet to even hit the 50% capacity, topping out at just 237 babies born in its best year. The center, now known as Odamin, caters to women with low-risk pregnancies who live within the Winnipeg Regional Health Authority. Executive Director Kemlyn Nebhard says without more resources, they don't have ability to do more.
I would love to be doing 500 births a year, but to safely do that, we need more funding. We would need a lot more supports to be able to do that. And so, in a lot of ways, we need more midwives trained in the province, more funding for midwives, and more supports for the birth center assistants.
Midwife shortages have plagued the center and Manitoba for years. According to the WRHA, roughly a quarter of women who want a midwife aren't able to get one. A shortage of snow and cold weather has resulted in a shortage of gasoline in some northern communities. In Shamattawa First Nation, it is being called a critical situation. Trina Miles is a medical driver in Shamattawa.
As a medical driver, it's very critical. It's urgent to have gasoline because how are we supposed to get our patients to and from, especially in emergency situations or life-threatening situations?
Miles says the school had to be temporarily closed because buses also can't run without fuel. The fuel is normally transported in on winter roads, but it's been too warm to open some of those roads. She says gas is expected to be flown in soon. How warm was yesterday where you were? 24 warm weather records were smashed in southern Manitoba yesterday. Environment Canada meteorologist Chris Stammers says McCreary reached 12.1 degrees. Morden and Winkler were both 11.3. But Winnipeg did not break a record because our official temperatures taken at the airport, not at the warmer Forks. The record is 5 degrees set in 1952. Winnipeg was 7.3 at the Forks yesterday. That didn't count. It only reached 4.7 at the airport, which is official. And it is an unusual warmth and an unusual sound for the last day of January. Golf balls flying off the tee at Shooters Golf Centre in Winnipeg. The driving range was opened in January for the first time ever. Manager Eason Sarazani sold about 25 buckets of balls and hopes to keep the range open through the weekend.
It's just awesome to be outside in January and golfing, enjoy the weather, and it kind of breaks up the winter, so everybody just had a big smile on their faces and everybody was happy.
Not quite everybody is happy. Festival du Voyageur is going to look a lot different this year because of this unusually mild weather. The snow sculptures usually set up around the city and all over the festival site, but that won't happen this year. There just isn't enough snow. Festival Executive Director Brianne Lavalley-Heckert says they've had to pivot.
Experimenting with different mediums, things like hay, trees, different pieces of sustainability art practices that are going to be implemented. So we were really excited to be able to start having a conversation, sustainable art.
Lavalley-Heckert says there will be one snow sculpture at the entrance, but that's all they can manage given the weather. She says Festival may look different this year as it begins in the middle of this month, but she hopes the mild weather will bring even more people out to Festival. You can find more news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thank you, Heather Wells, for the morning. I just want to mention that we had mentioned on the program we were going to hear from the lawyer of the family of a South Sudanese man killed by police in 2019 here. They're awaiting an inquest into his death. They've been waiting 5 years. We just had a challenge getting that interview up on the show for you today, so stay tuned throughout the day here to CBC, to our other local programs at noon and 3 to 6 for Up to Speed. Before we get into last weather traffic, I really want to thank all of our associate producers in our current affairs unit, our leaders, Nellie Gonzalez and Leif Larson, and our live team this morning that really was a team. So thank you to Travis Peterson, to Corey Funk, to Abby Adeyemi, but especially to our hardworking news department. Well, we couldn't have put on the show without them this morning for various reasons. And every morning it's like that, but especially this morning. So thank you, Megan Ketchison, and thank you to Heather Wells as well, and Aaron Broman in our news center this morning. All right, Abby, the weather.
Mild start of February with a little bit of freezing fog. For folks in Brandon, you're heading to a high of +2. Churchill is cloudy, chance of light snow, high -4. It's -2 in Gimli, -2 in Steinbach, -4 in Brandon, -4 in Steinbach, and -2 in Winnipeg.
All right, thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
Corey, anything to say?
Yeah, north-southbound Pembina between Manahan and Adamar, that's near Chevrier. Police emergency vehicles are responding to an incident there that's got the median lane and curb lanes kind of closed there. So just be really careful if you are heading down Pembina in the direction of Chevrier.
All right, thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
And we're here because you're listening. So thank you so much for listening, for tuning in, for being part of our YouTube channel. Lots of comments coming in this morning. And weigh in anytime. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Take care, be well, have a great rest of your day, and we're back again tomorrow with Information Radio right here on CBC.